Going live. All right. And we're live. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Growing with Fishes podcast 289. I'm your host, Steve, with Ponics. And this week we have a gentleman who I wanted to have on for quite a while, and it took a little bit of finagling schedule-wise, but I'm certainly super happy to have him on the show finally. I think you guys are going to find him as awesome of a guest as I do. We have Martin's World all the way from Ireland. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's a really pleasure. Early in the morning here it is.
Yeah, he's joining us quite late his time, so we had to move the show up a little bit today. So if you're wondering why we're at our normal time, it's because he's in Ireland and he's joining us live. So we try to be a little bit mindful of his time as well.
Yeah, you're very accommodating. I appreciate that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time as well. Also, if you guys haven't checked it out before, be sure to check out Marty and I have our own Aquaponic cannabis class. You can find over APMedclass.com. Also, be sure to check out, we have the Supernatural Conference coming up here at the end of July. You can find that. Oh, man. I'll pull up the website here later on in the episode and plug that as well. But be sure to check that out at Supernatural Conference in Oklahoma the last weekend of July. I'll be speaking there along with a wonderful group of other people. Wendy Kornberg will be there from Ganjineer, as well as Patrick King from Soil King. He'll be there as well. And a whole bunch of other awesome speakers, Chris Trump, and a whole bunch of other wonderful, wonderful people. Alrighty, thanks a lot for joining us today, Martin's World. Would you want me to call you Martin, or what would you prefer?
Yeah, Martin. Martin sounds good.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us. For those of you that don't know him, he has a wonderful podcast called Martin's World. I enjoy following it on the weekends and also during the week as well, and whenever else I can tune in. And he is one of the main activists over there in Ireland that really helps kind of push this whole thing together. He's also a medical cannabis patient himself, has a seizure disorder and uses it to treat his own medical ailments. So he really is leading the way for legalization in Ireland and really fighting the good fight by providing both a podcast and then also in-person, representation when these things matter. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us today. You are really one of the people I kind of look up to in terms of the activist side. I think you kind of set an example for people on how to go about doing it in a lot of different ways. And I'm excited to have you on today. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I suppose I've been at this quite a while, so I'd want to be kind of getting good at it now at this stage. But it wasn't really by choice that I became an activist. I suppose, like many activists out there, I became activated. I think that is the term, really. I became activated because of my own lived experience through cannabis. I was first introduced to cannabis by my cousins in the form of hash over here in Ireland, and this form of soap bar wasn't really the best quality of cannabis really at the time, to be honest. But it was good for what it was. But that was how I got introduced to it at about 15. It was quite a positive experience, and it wasn't until I got caught with cannabis then at 17 that I first experienced the negative sides of cannabis. Which is when you get caught with it. And that kind of led me down a long road then of activism. I went home that night after the cops, the Gardaí here at the side of the road, read the law that I broke, which was the Section 3 of the 1977 Misuse of Drugs Act. So I went home, I looked that up, and it's kind of like, geez, 1977, we're in 2000 and odd here. Like, kind of what's going on here? Surely there's been a lot. We've learned a lot more since then. But no, sadly, we haven't really. Like, we're still believing a lot of the myths and hysteria that was told back then, and I couldn't really believe it. What I experienced that evening, it was horrible. It was traumatic, really, to have your privacy or you're violated like that. You're just I suppose your liberty, your freedom. Like, it was infringed upon, that the guards, they came to stop me, and from my own eyes, I was doing nothing wrong. Yes, I was in possession of this substance, but who was really at risk? Like, what warranted, like, what justified what happened that evening? Like, the violation that I experienced of my privacy, my freedom of travel, because that's what happened. I was stopped when I was going from A to B, not because I was driving dangerously, but because my car was profiled. because I was profiled as a driver of that car as a young person at the time, a young male driver, and yeah, I suppose that's it. The long story short, and I didn't like what happened, and I kind of really just took a stand on it since then. I met some great people throughout the years, and yeah, we've led a good, strong fight here, and the fight is really strong here now in Ireland. The community is really getting much stronger here. There's a much more united front now going forward than there ever was before. So I'm really hopeful of the change that's hopefully only around the corner here in Ireland. But it has been a long, long road travelled.
No, I'm unfamiliar. Do you guys have an unlawful search and seizure law the way the United States does, or is that not at all, present within Irish law?
No, see, that's the problem with the Misuse of Drugs Act, and it was brought up actually, interestingly enough, at the time when these acts were being introduced, as how these powers being bestowed upon Gardaí were going to infringe upon people's rights, privacy, freedom of travel, and all of that, and it was completely ignored. So since the introduction of these laws back in 1977, the Gardaí here, they have effectively can stop and search anybody they suspect of being in possession of drugs. And like, what does that mean? Who they suspect? Like, who's going to fit that description? Is it going to be your politician in a suit, or is it going to be the young fella in a hoodie? and it's like, is a politician in a suit any less likely to be doing drugs? I think not. That they actually tested the toilets and the dial here where our government meet, and they found traces of cocaine in the bathroom of the dial. Where they also have a subsidized bar. Also, just to add that in, that we subsidize the alcohol consumption there for government politicians too, which is quite funny. But yeah, so we don't have any kind of unlawful stop and searches around drugs anyway. As soon as a guard says that he's a suspicion, and that suspicion can simply be, oh, you smell like cannabis. It's like, how is a guard even trained to smell cannabis? I'm like, it's just the most abused law. It's one of these abused laws that the guards know that you've got no power as an individual to challenge them once they suspect you of being in possession of drugs. So it's a tough one. So I've made it my business now to really challenge the guards over here, because we've got CBD flowers and stuff like that here now as well. So there's kind of this gray area that these things are existing in, where there's like a low amount of THC. So under European law, it's seen as a food stuff. So we're kind of having a bit of fun with that in the courts here at the moment, where they're trying to do people for cannabis possession, but it's technically not fitting the description of cannabis as per the Misuse of Drugs Act. So we're having a bit of fun with them on that one. We're using their willingness to do their job against them.
Yeah, then that's how you help break the system, is you throw a few wrenches in the gears.
Yeah, that's it. I think once you can shake the fear of the authorities, then really as a community going forward, you can really do a lot to get the change that you need. I think that's what's mostly needed, to shed the shackles of prohibition, is a united community going forward, and a community of people for one who use cannabis. Just acknowledging the fact that, look, nobody's getting harmed in doing this. If we're using cannabis responsibly, then what is the problem? And once we see that we're doing no wrong, and we believe in ourselves and that what we're doing is right, then why fear any authority who come after you? Because if they're to punish you, they're on the wrong side of this. We've seen this in other instances, with how we treated gay people in the past, how we treated people of color in the past. And we've seen how laws that once existed, just because something was a law, didn't actually make it right. Just because, what was a buggery here in Ireland was the term. If two men were engaged in buggery, that was seen as to be an immoral act and a crime, and they would be punished. And that there's still people actually walking around Ireland today with convictions for engaging in buggery, which is ridiculous. But again, the way we treat people who use cannabis is no more different, because like what right has a government to prohibit a behavior? Because that's effectively what they're trying to do. They're trying to prohibit a behavior. And if we were to allow them to prohibit this behavior, you know, where do we draw the line? At what point, like, do the government get to come along and say, hey, look, actually, you know, your consumption of cheeseburgers, it's getting a bit out of hand. We're going to limit your cheeseburger consumption to fucking one cheeseburger a week? Or, do you know, like, you know, in the interest of your health, because that's effectively what they're saying. In the interest of your health, we're prohibiting your use of cannabis. It just makes no sense. It's like they might as well start prohibiting our abuse of cheeseburgers, if you want to put it that way too. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of you that aren't aware, in the United States, police officers can't just randomly search you because they have to have probable cause. And that's how many people actually get their drug arrest overturned, is because they were falsely searched or searched under a false premise. A smell also, just because you smell like weed, there's multiple circuit courts, I believe 3 different circuit courts now in the United States, that have all ruled in favor of the person who is being searched. So, you know your law and stand up for yourself when it's appropriate. Shut the fuck up if you don't know.
Yeah, I think they have that in the UK as well. We're unfortunate here in Ireland that we're not. We don't have a good justice system. They always find in the favor of themselves. But over in the UK as well, the smell of cannabis isn't a probable cause of for stop and search. Because again, you know, what is the smell of cannabis really? Like, officers aren't trained for it. And there's so many things out there now that smell like cannabis these days.
Absolutely. So you do quite a bit in the activist space in Ireland. Tell us a little bit more about your activism, because you are quite passionate, and I certainly enjoy listening to your activism on your show.
Yeah. I suppose in the last few years, I've gotten a lot more active with my activism. I've always been kind of restrained a little bit. I've always, like, from day one, going back to when I was 17, I've always been just very solid in my position that, like, hey, I've done no wrong here. That what happened to me was much more wrong than anything that I done. So I was always very strong in that position. So I was always chomping at the bit to get out and get involved in civil disobedience and just campaigning around this laws. Because the way I see it is, it's like, okay, if I get caught with this, if I get caught with cannabis once, if I get a conviction for it once, why not? Why stop there? Why not have 100? If the justice system is so committed to be bringing me forward, it's like, how much time are they willing to put forward to get me behind bars or what have you? But I suppose through different groups that I met over the years, I first met with Legalised Cannabis Ireland, and there was a number of activists there. So they were a bit more calm and collected at the time, and they were a bit more organized and constructive, which was great. We went out, we done different days, like Support Don't Punish campaign. We took part in that every year. We would have the Million Marijuana March, which was the first Saturday of May, which is tomorrow, actually. No, sorry, the 7th. That's tomorrow for me, actually. But that's the first Saturday of May, the 7th of May. So there was a number of campaigns that we would have done. So that kind of allowed me to direct my energies into things, and to not go and throw myself in front of the cops and be kind of like, hey, come here, making a big deal about it. I was always kind of, with those campaigns, I was always like, we need to get people to be going in and just engaging in civil disobedience. And we did successfully do that then with the picnic events that we started organizing in recent years. So the 420, there was the Clouds on the Keys. That would have been kind of our 420 event over here, and that would have happened above in Dublin. Dublin being the kind of second capital of Ireland. I'm in the real capital down here in Cork. I just have to get that in there as a Cork person. But yeah, we led lots of campaigns, lots of events over. But what would always happen is we would lose momentum. That the events would go off great, but there was just too big a gap between the events. the community was never formalizing. It was never getting a real structure to it. So there was a lot of missed opportunities, I suppose, but we learned over the years. And I think we've learned anyway over the years, as in the last 2 years now, we've more successfully held events on a much more regular basis. Last year, there was, I think we'd over 20 events going on across Ireland, where there was civil disobedience style events where people were encouraged to bring their own cannabis, that we were going to be openly consuming cannabis in public as in open defiance of the law, under the watch of the authorities. And it was a major success, to be fair. The authorities respected our right to protest. There was one instance down here in Killarney, and it was an unfortunate one. One of the guys who showed up, he was known by the cops, and the cops did decide to stop and search this guy. And I think he had brought an ounce with him, and he was hoping to share this with people there on the day. But again, we're there behind these people, supporting them. He's yet to go up before the courts. As I said, that happened last summer. So we're going to be following that guy once he gets up in the courts, and we will be protesting outside of the courts. And I think, again, as I said, that the community is getting to a point now where there's an alliance. There's a much more, and again, that's one of the groups that has formed. It's the Cannabis Activist Alliance. So there's an alliance of people, and I really think we're getting behind the motto now of one for all and all for one, where, you know, if one of us goes down in the courts, that there's going to be a massive campaign there supporting any of those individuals within the alliance. So there's a number of growers in there. There's a number of patients as part of the alliance. And there's a number of ongoing court cases now, one of the more prominent ones being John O'Regan. He's a guy, I believe he's in his 50s, grey hair guy, again, you know, maybe about 60, 70 kilos, like, you know, just to put him in perspective, try to paint a picture, a guy like a non-threatening individual. He's up before the courts because he got caught with his own with his cannabis plants at home, and his own cannabis and some mushrooms as well. I believe he might have got caught with some psilocybin mushrooms too. Again, nothing of commercial quantities, his own personal use of cannabis and mushrooms. And they're dragging him through the courts. They're harassing the poor man, but he's committed that if he's to be arrested, he's going to be going on a hunger strike as soon as he goes in behind bars. And I'm committed that if he's to ever have the gavel slammed down on him and committed to behind bars, I'll be camping outside of any prison that he gets locked up inside of. And I hope there will be a community of people out there too. We'll bring with us cannabis plants, cannabis, and there's going to be an encampment there of cannabis activists. And that's what that's what needs to happen. That's the only way I envision change happening. I don't believe in the government that we currently have. I don't believe that there's the will within it to bring about change. I believe it's down to us, the people, to bring it about. And the only way we're going to get it about is just by taking a stand and uniting. And that's how we're going to be doing it. Unfortunate for John, if he does go behind bars, he's going to hunger strike. But luckily for him, fortunately for him, there's going to be a massive community of people out there supporting him on the outside, you know. And I'm extending that to anybody else out there as well, across the island of Ireland, you know. On my own platform when I go live, I always say it when I do the 420 news 3 times a week. I make sure I say it as part of that. Guys, if any of you are affected by this, you know, get in touch with me, share your story, share your experience, speak out. Let's unite. Let's use your story as a front for our campaign. Because that's what we need. We need real stories, real people, real individuals, and how the prohibition of cannabis is negatively affecting their lives. That their cannabis use, you know, just tell the truth. Is your cannabis use effectively a negative effect in your life, or is it a positive one? For me, it's been largely positive. The only negative has been the legal aspects of it. That's been it. And I think that the more that we can really kind of sing that from the rooftops and to highlight, you know, the harms of the prohibition of cannabis, then the closer we'll be coming to getting the change that's needed. Because, man, I just got tagged in a number of articles here in Ireland, recent ones. 2,500 indecent images a guy got caught with recently, and he gets off with, you know, an old slap on the wrist, a 2-year suspended sentence. And the same judge presiding over that case only handed down a 10-year sentence to an individual caught with €6 million worth of cannabis. It's like, all right, €6 million worth of cannabis sounds like a lot, but it's not really. It's what, 100 or so kilos, in reality, it's a good 420 weekend.
Yeah, for Americans, that's about 220 pounds of cannabis.
Yeah, there you go. Like it's not a whole lot. Like how long in reality would that really last? Like it's going to make more people happy than sad anyway. That's for sure.
No, but I agree
just,
with you there. I think that people that are looking at underage children certainly should be spending a hell of a lot more time behind bars than someone growing cannabis or dealing cannabis. That's just ridiculous.
Exactly. I would always. I was asking the question this the other day. I was just like how many child images do you have to have for a judge to look at you or to kind of like punish you more than a person getting caught with a cannabis plant, because a single cannabis plant here in Ireland, you can still get up to 8 years in prison for a single cannabis plant, the cultivation of cannabis. It carries with it like an 8-year prison sentence here in Ireland, if a judge wants to give you that.
I was just going to ask you, what is the current lay of the land there as far as cannabis? Can you give us a quick rundown?
In what regard?
In terms of the law, what is the current law status of the law there?
Well, it's illegal, I suppose, just to get that one out there. But yeah, if you get caught with cannabis here, there's supposed to be this de facto decriminalization that they talk about, where if a cop catches you at the side of the road, now they have the power of discretion where they can give you a caution at the side of the road and let you go. They'll confiscate your cannabis and they let you go. That's supposed to happen. I've heard of it happening in certain instances, but still they take your name and you still get a caution. So there's still a bit of a record there of it, but it's not a conviction. So there has been that slight little change there recently. When it comes to the medical use of cannabis, then we have instances where people have gotten a license from our Minister for Health. You have to get a specialist, a consultant to apply to the Minister for Health. And the Minister for Health can give you a special license, then an exemption where you're allowed to have access to cannabis. That cannabis then primarily comes from Bedrocan in Holland, and it's imported into the country. For quite some time, the patients actually had to leave Ireland and collect their prescriptions in person in Holland and bring it back to Ireland. Most of the patients who've gotten access to cannabis through the ministerial license are kids with severe epilepsy. It was only because of the pandemic that traveling has ceased. Because of the pandemic, they were now able to facilitate the private delivery of the cannabis to the patients. And it's hilarious, actually. One of the parents of the kids who've got the license, I was talking to her and she was saying it's crazy, Martin. She goes, that the van comes and it's got all of these cameras all over it. It's a big high-tech security van because it's delivering the medical cannabis. It's a specialized van just for that alone. Like obviously they probably had it for other reasons, maybe high value goods and extra layer of security there. But she said, I've never seen a van like it before deliver something. So it was a crazy experience for her in that one. But it was one that she was very thankful for because obviously with her daughter, being with the condition that she has, with the pandemic and all of that, her fucking anxiety was through the roof with bringing anything, any viruses home with her. So thank God that they're facilitating that for him. But I suppose, to put it into perspective, then that the licenses, there is less than 30 patients, I believe, that currently have a license. The government introduced what they call the Medical Cannabis Access Program, and that's been a joke. It's called the Medical Cannabis Access Program, but nobody's gotten access through it. As I believe, still to date, no patients have gotten. I think maybe there might be one patient who's gotten access to the Epidiolex. That's the CBD product that comes from GW Pharmaceuticals. That were purchased there as part of that big was it like $9 billion fucking sale or something like that by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. But yeah, that's another news story I covered there in the past.
Formulated by Ethan Russo, by the way. I know he's
Oh,
trying to do the whole organic thing, but I still don't. You know, he worked for GW too long for me to really trust him.
oh, really? Yeah, I didn't know Ethan Russo. I worked with GW.
He was their head of their cannabis program.
At least they had a
He's
good head in there, I suppose.
his name is on a lot of those patents.
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah. I would
Yeah,
have heard of
go look
Ethan
up the
Russo.
patent.
Yeah, I would have heard of him in the past, but I'd never known him to be involved now with GW.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he was for a long time. He was their head of state there.
yeah. I would just get too annoyed if I started looking into this stuff, and because again, I done a 4-year honors degree in herbal science, and that went on between 2014 and 2018. And I was looking at this whole kind of cannabis thing just going off the charts, exploding. And I done a history, an ethnobotanical history of cannabis, really going into the history of it. And it's a plant that's been around with humans for millennia, as long as humans have been kind of cultivating plants. The cannabis plant has existed there because of its usefulness. It's an incredibly useful plant. Um, but what I discovered was the removal of the cannabis plant from the pharmacopoeias. And I was shocked to find that it was removed from the American herbal pharmacopoeia and the British herbal pharmacopoeia back in 1942. It's just like, it's like the burning of the books, the burning of the fucking libraries at Alexandria. We're removing the evidence that was there, that was needed to support the use of cannabis as a medicine. I was shocked when I came across that as part of that study. So it only further I can just get it impassioned me to do something about this, because there's some injustices that are being served around this plant over the years. But yeah, looking at the people like the GW then and stuff like that, that was going on while I was going through college, and I was just kind of getting really annoyed that these companies were out there patenting these different compounds, these different products from this plant. At the same time, we're being told there's no medicinal value to the plant. At the same time, I was getting stigmatized in my fucking college course for wanting to study this plant. Oh, it annoyed me as well.
And they have a competitor to Marinol called Sativex as well, which is their Delta 9 product.
That's right. Yeah. Sativex. Yep. Yeah. That's approved for use there as well in Ireland,
Yeah. But GW Pharma was the only company for like 5 or 7 years or something that had a DEA approval for import export to the United States as well. So
yeah,
they're a pretty scummy company.
Yeah, that's just a big boys club, it's just it's club for the boys, and
what it comes down to is this, right? Like, big pharma needs to be completely excluded from this market and written out of the law completely. Why? The war on drugs. Veterans and POWs of the war on drugs absolutely are owed the right to this fucking market. Like, yeah, it's a religion belief, right? There's no like thing in the world that should make it that way. I get that, right? But my personal belief is that pharma companies need to get the fuck out. Synthetic cannabinoids need to be excluded from the market and banned for 25 years, and all this other garbage needs to just be outright illegal. And it has to do with reparations for the war on drugs. Let people compete. Put a 1 or 2 acre cap on farms. Let everyone actually grow and create the jobs market in the United States that would allow this stuff to come to fruition. And that would create 100%. More jobs and a better economy, and actually make things right for the completely insane war on drugs that we have. Will that happen? Probably not, but that's what should happen.
It should happen, and it's crazy to think over there in America as well, the contrast of your environment at the moment. In one state, cannabis is legal. You can walk into a store and you can buy it. And in other states, you've got people serving life sentences because they got caught with a couple of 20 bags. It's like, what in the name of kind of world are we living in, or all where people can see that the insanity to what it is that they're doing. Like, again, my own experience. I'm a dad of three kids. Like, if I'm to be removed out of this equation because of my cannabis use, like the devastation that's going to do to those 3 little kids who each rely on me to be the dad. And I'm not going to be, toot my own horn, but like I'm a pretty good dad. I'm there from, I spent the afternoon there bringing my kids to their her drama theater practice, to camogie practice, football practice, and things like that. I do quite a bit. Like cannabis, it's like while I'm very passionate and I'm very active around it, it's not that significant. Like it's a very important tool within my life. It's a very useful tool that I use, but it's just like in terms of like the amount of time I spend in my day with cannabis, it's teeny, it's tiny. Like the amount of time it takes me to pack a bowl, consume my cannabis, that's it. It's done. It's like moving on now. Like, it's just get on with my day, get the next stuff done. It's kind of like coffee. It's like, it's another tool that you would use. You get up in the morning, you'd have your coffee. It's like, if I got criminalized for my coffee use, I would probably be just as passionate about it. But it's like, it doesn't mean the coffee is fucking everything in my life either. It's like everything in my life is my kids. Like the kids are my most important thing in my life. And when I was in prison, like I had to spend 5 days in prison for my crime around cannabis. I refused to pay my fines. I refused to show up in court. The cops looking for me for 3 years. They eventually caught me, and I spent 5 days in Cork prison, which is said to be the punishment prison of Ireland. At the time, you had to shit and piss in your cell at nighttime because once they locked the doors at nighttime in the cell, you had no toilet in the cell, so they gave you a bucket instead. There's prisoners now actually getting reparations, I suppose is that the word, for that. They're getting paid out. I didn't even bother to see how much I was entitled to for my 5-day stay there, but there probably is a check out there with my name in it somewhere for my 5-day stay for that. But it was a horrible thing. But for me, the most traumatic part of it was being able to look out the cell at night, see the stars, and be thinking, my kids are only over the hill looking at that very same sky, and I can't reach out and touch them. And that broke my heart, man. I had the fella underneath me, the bunk underneath me, telling me to shut up. He was like, stop crying, like, because I was, and I've no shame in saying it. I was in hysterics. I was wrong crying because I couldn't hold my kids that night, and for what? Like for cannabis. It's like, as I said, it's not that important a thing, but it's the principle of the fucking matter. Like, it's the principle. I've done nothing wrong. The treatment I'm getting because of this, like this little bit of herb that I have here, like it's just crazy, that the suffering my kids had to go through as well. 5 days without their dad. My daughter at the time, she was of an age where I think my partner didn't tell her where I was. She just kind of said, I was away somewhere, but we didn't. She only found out I was in prison 3 years ago when I ran for government there. I ran in the election, and as part of that, I told my story in the local paper. And my daughter read it, and I let her read it. And I knew what she was going to be reading in it, and that was my way of kind of telling her, look, yeah, I spent some time in prison, because for me, when she was growing up, what's prison for? That's for bad people. That's where bad people go. Like, how am I going to now look at my daughter and say, yeah, well, actually, how are you explaining that to a 6-7-year-old at the time, that it's for bad people, but yeah, they kind of send good people there too, who kind of do things that are said to be bad, but aren't really, it's like, you can't really explain that. So I'd no choice myself, but to lie to my child for a number of years and keep her in the dark about that part of me. And that's a hard thing to do as well. That I suppose, we cannabis is banned because of the harms that can do to your mental health. But what's keeping fucking secrets from your kids doing to your mental health? What's viewing yourself as being a bad person, being ashamed of a certain part of your life doing to your own mental health? It's like, it's not fucking good anyway. And that's all the prohibition of cannabis. That's not the cannabis. That's the prohibition of cannabis. Prohibition of cannabis is by far more harmful for an individual's mental health than cannabis is ever going to be. You get like that fucking, is it Bill Murray who says it? The worst thing about cannabis is when you get the most dangerous thing about cannabis is getting caught with it. It's fucking so true. It really is. I think that's why it's funny. It's funny because it's true, isn't that what they say?
Yeah. And you actually use cannabis too for your own medical health stuff. Do you want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I suppose before I got diagnosed with epilepsy, I would definitely say that my own use of cannabis as a younger individual was also medical. I suppose I would have possibly be within a population of young people here in Ireland who were unsuccessfully diagnosed with something like ADHD, that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Because I was quite an impulsive young person. I was quite an energetic, adventurous young person. And I suppose I was a bit mischievous as part of that as well growing up. But when I got introduced to the cannabis hash at the time with my cousins, I think it just grounded me in a way that I was never able to do before. And I think, my enjoyment of cannabis was more because of the therapeutic aspects of the use of cannabis. It wasn't that I enjoyed getting high. It was that I enjoyed actually being a healthy minded individual, because without the cannabis, my mind wasn't in a very healthy condition, I suppose, as a young person. The circuitry up there, it was just it was firing wildly, I suppose. So cannabis, yeah, for me as a younger person, there was definitely a level of self-medication there, therapeutic use. So yeah, that's my own positive experience with cannabis as a younger person, and I definitely would say my medical use of cannabis started back then. I got diagnosed then with epilepsy in November of 2021. And since then, I've been a bit more intensively trying to treat myself with the cannabis to treat the seizures. But unfortunately, just because the legal environment there, that's not as easy to do. I can't get access to cannabis through with the help of the health professionals, unfortunately. So that leaves me quite restricted. You're kind of working in the dark then, really, when you're working with cannabis you might have it from at home or from other sources, because we don't have the labs to be testing stuff here. So as I say, once I got my diagnosis in November, I was doing some homemade extracts, making some cannabis pills. I was taking those like 2-3 times a day, just to keep the level of cannabinoids up in the body, just to try to mitigate any potential seizures. And I was successfully doing that, but I think recently then I just was burning the candle on both ends with my activism and all of that. Spending too many late nights, just up writing articles for the blogs, preparing stuff for the podcast, and driving up and down the road. My most recent fucking series of seizures there came after I had just driven back from Dublin. So I was after spending, an entire day driving up to Dublin, campaigning above in Dublin, and driving home again. It was a nice 18-20 hour day put in. And then the next day I just had a serious number of seizures. Put me in hospital for about 5 or 6 days. Took me about 2 or 3 days really to realize where I was and who I was again. It was that kind of serious seizure. I had pretty much almost forgotten who I was for a period of time. But luckily, as you can see, I'm back now, thankfully, and I hope that will continue. I'm going to work with the consultants here. Unfortunately, I can't get them to work with me with the cannabis. The way it works here with epilepsy and cannabis, I have to try the drugs that they want to give me. So they've tried me on Tegretol, and my body didn't agree with the Tegretol. That kind of made me nauseous and stuff like that. I wasn't really responding very well to it, and I still had seizures while I was using it as well. They've now since switched me over to a drug called Keppra. So they're now trying me on the Keppra. And if that doesn't work, then there's probably another drug that they'll want to try. And then I'm considered eligible for consideration for cannabis use if the fourth drug fails, I believe. So there's still a bit of a road to go there before I can get access to cannabis legally here with the aid of the health professionals. And that's what I want. I want to be working with the health professionals. It's just unfortunate that this is the requirements, to be working with a medicine that I'm happy to be working with. Like I've got nothing against, pharmaceutical medications, but in terms of a preference, I've certainly got a preference there to, again, prevention, and to be working with my health in a more holistic way, working through food, exercise, all of that, a whole complement of things. Whereas I meet my health consultant, and like the guy is just so quick just to give you a drug and get you out the door. He doesn't ask like what's your lifestyle like. He doesn't ask like how you sleeping or any of this kind of stuff. There's no real in-depth analysis of who you are as an individual. There's no personalization there of your medical treatment within the system here in Ireland, unfortunately. No, I don't know. People might think I'm fucking living in a fantasy land or something like that. That my expectations are a bit out there, but I do think that we should have a much more personalized healthcare, much more tailored healthcare to suit the individual, because not everybody leads the same lifestyle, and not everybody wants to treat their symptoms in the same way. Again, I'm much more under the guise of prevention, rather than treatment. I'd rather prevent something occurring rather than if I can try to treat something when it occurs. So I'd be much more interested as to what it is, and if it's exhaustion, if it's stress. I do believe my epilepsy has been triggered as well by stress. And I suppose we can go on to that. I don't know if I'm waffling or if I'm going off in too many tangents or anything, but my epilepsy.
No, please tell us about it, because I think there's a lot of people that are going through what you're going through, and they haven't heard someone they can relate to, especially on the cannabis patient side. And then we also have a lot of people that are into cannabis, but they haven't heard this side of the industry and why this is so important to fight for, and why people like yourself that are kind of at the forefront of the activism in these different countries that really haven't gotten to the same place the United States are, why it's so important to help support them any way we can.
Yeah. Well, my epilepsy, I suppose, I just want to get this one out there. It started in 2014. And I went undiagnosed up until November of last year, 2021. I was being wrongly diagnosed with vasovagal, which is down to blood pressure. My family has kind of got a history of heart issues. I was always very health conscious around my heart anyway because of that. But they were putting it down to that vasovagal blood pressure for a number of years. So I was incorrectly diagnosed up until last year. But in 2014, my epilepsy started after that 5-day stay in prison. My 5-day stay in prison ended with me getting what's known as a temporary release. So I was supposed to spend 2 months in prison for my crime of being in possession of cannabis, never more than 50 euros worth, never more than like 2 or 3 grams of cannabis. But I was supposed to spend 2 months in prison for that. I spent 5 days in there. I got left out on temporary release. What that means is I have to go to the local Garda station, the local cop shop, and have they take out a book, and I have to sign my name on that book every day. Every single day I had to sign my name on that book in front of a guard. And one day I completely forgot to go up there. It was a really nice sunny summer's day, and I spent the day out with my kids and stuff like that. We had a great day. And it just completely slipped my mind. I forgot to go up to the guard station that night, and I was lying in bed. It was about 12:30. And it came to me. I was like, shit, fuck. I was like, I never signed on at the guard station. I was freaking out because I was like, shit, they're going to be sending a guard's car up there out the, like, I just went to panic mode. Like, really, like, it just set me off, like, mentally. I rang the guard station. They let me come up late that night to sign the book and stuff like that. The guard was cool about it, and that was great and stuff. But still, the mental distress I went through before that, I thought like that was it. It was a short thing. I'm going back to prison now, and I'm going to have to spend 2 months in prison again. It's going to be shit, pissing and shitting in your cell and all of this shit, in there with fucking rapists and all of these other kind of not nice people. I know there was other people in there as well for cannabis and stuff, but majority of the people I met inside there were not nice people, not people you'd really want to be associating with. So I panicked. I went home after I signed the book. I went back to bed. And that night I had my very first seizure. I didn't know at the time it was a seizure. I went to the hospital the next day, because what happened that night was I was lying in bed with my partner, and I went stiff as a board. My arms went stretched out, kind of out across like that, almost as if I was up in a cross, crucified kind of position. My girlfriend, my partner in the bed next to me was like, kind of like, what the fuck you up to, Martin? Like, I was like, cop on. Like, she didn't realize I was having a seizure either at the time. It kind of lasted for maybe a couple of seconds, maybe 30 seconds or something like that. But we didn't think too much of it. I did go to the hospital the next day after college. I went into college and I went to hospital because college was next to the hospital. Told them, I think I might have had a seizure last night. And they were like, you think you had a seizure? Like, you better come straight in here and we'll get you in. And luckily enough, they put me onto the machine and scanned my brain, and they couldn't find any seizure activity in my brain at the time. So again, as I said, I went undiagnosed for a number of years then, until my partner actually got a video of me having a full-blown seizure on the floor. And that's when I was able to get a diagnosis of epilepsy then. But all of my seizures coincided with increased pressure from the authorities here in my life. All of my seizures, I can kind of coincide them with a time when maybe the cops would have showed up with a summons, when I might have been stopped in search, because there was one time I was out working, and I was delivering Chinese food for a local Chinese place there. And again, just for no fault of my own, I got profiled again. A young fella fits the description, out in an area where there's known to be drug dealing going on or something like that. Apparently, actually, my Chinese, where I was delivering for, the Chinese restaurant I was delivering for, it was around the corner from a known heroin dealer. And where I was parking my car was like around pretty much outside of this heroin dealer's house. But they came and searched me. All I had in my fucking car was a joint on that night that they valued it at €10 worth of cannabis. But not long after that, 2 weeks later, I was driving down the road with my family, going to a dog show, and there was a big checkpoint on the main road. And I was just thinking, checking tax and insurance here. It's going to be grand. Everything's on my window. It should be cool. Goes up and the cops is like, do you mind pulling into the side? And I'm just kind of like, is everything all right? And she goes, do you mind pulling in for the side? We're going to search your car for drugs. Came up here that you were caught with drugs 2 weeks ago. And he goes, hang on a second. I goes, I got caught with a joint 2 weeks ago. I have my family in the car. He goes, we're going to a dog show. He goes, you really want to do this to me here on a Sunday, Easter Sunday as well? It was a family day out, Easter Sunday morning. They took me and my entire family, my partner, my two daughters, and our two dogs, and they put us on the side of the road on a busy Sunday on a busy road, a big main road, two lanes of traffic, and they searched us, all because of that joint. That evening, I had a seizure again. I was just, my stress was just through the roof. About a couple of weeks later, I had another seizure again. It was just all of the times that these cops have interfered with me, that the stress it brought on in my life, it's caused me to have seizures. I just can't help but, again, just stress, as the how harmful cannabis prohibition is for our health. It's caused me seizures. I can laugh about it now, but like, it's a real serious thing.
Oh, and it's absolutely right. I've heard of other people too, kind of having a tremendous amount of stress, especially with PTSD, and then also dealing with stuff after that. On top of that, also having similar experiences to yourself, especially friends of mine that came back from, military in Iraq and Afghanistan, having very similar stories to yourself.
Yeah, it can't be easy. I thought it was great. We were out there for 420 just 2 weeks ago now, and we were above in Dublin, outside of where our government meet, above in the Dáil, and we had a number of guards above there, and we were all consuming cannabis, protesting openly, engaging in civil disobedience. And I was doing a live video, I think, at the time, and I commented, and I still, remember the feeling, but how welcoming a feeling it was to actually feel protected by the authorities there that day, for a change, whereas the norm is to feel threatened by them. And that shouldn't be the case. And I said that to one of the guards that were there on the day. I goes, I said it to him. I goes, it's so welcoming that I don't feel threatened by you right now, and that you're respecting our right to protest, and you're not coming and violating my privacy. You're not invading my rights, and taking my cannabis off of me. And he goes, yeah, well, we're just here to keep you safe. And I was just fucking, I was really moved by that. I just wish that could have been the everyday approach, from the authorities here, is like act when there's a need for them to be acting, not just to be following these fucking moralistic laws around cannabis. It's just silly, like.
I had a similar experience. I remember the first 420 in Denver after they legalized cannabis in, what was it, 2013, I think, because they legalized in November of 2012, so it would have been 420 of 2013, going there and watching a guy pull out like 4 pounds out of his backpack, and they searched his backpack, and it was in a clear bag, so they could see there was nothing in it. And they were just looking for guns and knives. That's all they gave a shit about. Anything else was perfectly fine. And that was a whole like mind fuck of an experience, because they're so used to being harassed all the time by authorities that, having them be chill and just looking for what you agree that should be looked for is a whole new experience.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. As young people, we shouldn't want to put a barrier between them and the authorities. The authorities should be there to protect them. And if you've got a barrier for communication between those two groups, then you've got a serious problem. And if one group feels threatened by the other, if you're a young person, if you got some cannabis on you, you're going to feel threatened by the authorities there. You're not going to seek help from them, should you need their assistance. And how often out there has a person been in a situation, you might be with your buddies and you might be consuming some cannabis, and I don't know, somebody might fucking do something to wrong you, and you're afraid to call the cops for assistance because, the cops might actually take more offense to the fact that you're consuming cannabis rather than, somebody who attempted to burglarize you or something, so you think of the situations, the cops responding to burglary calls, finding some cannabis then in the house of the person being burglarized, and then the victim becomes the fucking the perpetrator of a crime. It's sad, like that is a situation, but that's happening here in Ireland. We see it in so many communities now where young people, they've got this distrust of the guards. There's certain communities there, if a cop is seen to be going into your place and talking to you, your house could get battered that evening because you might be seen as a rat in that community. That's just such an unhealthy state for communities to be in, and it's all because of this illogical fucking war on drugs. It's a fantasy. It's never going to be achieved. We're never going to be able to control people's behaviors, through prohibition. It's not work for fucking rape, like, so why is it going to work for drugs? Like there's nobody wants to see an individual be harmed. To bring in that one about that comparison with rape, there's a prohibition on rape. It doesn't stop it from happening. But the thing is, nobody wants to be raped, and you want to see the individuals. That's why there's a punishment there. Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. That's why there's the punishment there, is because nobody wants to be a victim of that crime. But who's the victim of the crime of drug use? You can see quite plainly in an instance of rape, of burglary, where the victim is. But when it comes to drug use, who's the victim? Is the drug user? You're punishing a person for victimizing themselves. It's crazy. It's kind of like what we had here in Ireland, actually, for a while. We had a law where it was illegal to kill yourself. It's like, what? It's like if somebody tries to kill themselves, and if they're unsuccessful in doing it, you're going to send them to prison. It's like,
it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Yeah,
it makes no sense.
No, it's truly crazy, and a lot of it comes down to them not wanting you to think a different way, wanting you to stay and be a good little taxpayer and continue to fund the machine. But you also see this on the other side, because a lot of people don't talk about this. In South Africa during the apartheid, when they were trying to maintain power, they pumped an ungodly amount of government-produced drugs into the population there to drug the population, to make them less organized and to kind of distract them from organizing against the government. And they were actually trading abalone for chemical precursors to Chinese smugglers in order to fund the whole it's you're like a truly insane drug story to read up on. Read up on the South African apartheid, abalone and drug production, like whole fiasco. It's completely insane.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they
Well,
were making like quaaludes and all kinds of other things on an industrial scale for quite a long time.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. You know, governments have been probably doing this for quite some time. Like the whole war on drugs was used, you know, by governments as the guys, you know, to go in and take control of places. Like you've probably seen that, you know, what were the operations that went down? Was it an operation as a fucking Falcon or Condor? Was that the one, Operation Condor and stuff like that? The stuff that went down in South America, down in Mexico and stuff. They went
It's
in
a,
and
it's a
specifically
bunch of them
targeting
too.
political groups under the guise of the war on drugs. It's like
Oh yeah, and then
the
also
whole
too, I
thing
mean,
is
you want to talk
corrupt.
about the extreme end of the United States banking on the wrong dude. I mean, look up Papa Doc in Haiti. Literally, the most hideous dictator in all of this hemisphere in the last 500 years was directly funded by the United States government in Haiti. The
Yeah,
guy killed a huge percentage of his own country.
it's crazy, man. How often you find the presence of some of these like yeah the American governments, you know, in these different countries, their involvement with these different groups, you know, that they were in bed with so many of these different ones because there was so much money there within the drug scene at the time. You know, you look at I don't know if you've seen those TV shows, the Narcos, you know, the Mexican, the Colombian ones. Like I think that those are really great shows because they show the corruption that comes like from both sides, like how even the agents the agents that were fighting against how these guys like that they were like causing like innocent lives to be lost, like, you know, bloodshed to be spilled on the streets because of some of the crap that they were doing, just so that they can get their conviction, you know, just so that they can get their old fucking promotion and stuff. It's it was such it's such an eye opener to be looking at these things and to be just kind of thinking, and it's like, how is this even still going on? You know, another great show was American Boardwalk Empire, the alcohol prohibition one. Like again, it's like, how are we continuing on prohibition? It's like it's right there. It's like that. There's a prime example as to how prohibition fucks up your society and corrupts all levels of society,
Right.
and we
Not
continue with
only
it.
that, at least alcohol kills people, right? Weed has never killed a single human being in the history of the world. And the handful of deaths that are allegedly attributed to cannabis, none of them were only consuming cannabis. All of them were also on prescription drugs.
Yeah,
So the prescription drugs killed them, and that's, you know, there's no other time. They've given psychotic levels and people have taken psychotic levels of edibles and never ever died. Like you have to consume, you actually would displace the oxygen in your bloodstream before
yeah.
you die of toxicity from liver failure, or kidney failure, or some other organ failure. So it's not possible. So it just makes no sense why this would be illegal at all. Like it's complete insanity why any compound that's safer than water in terms of consumptions per milligram, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it really is, and that's why for me, I could never make sense of it. So I was just never able to accept it, and to be able to accept the punishment. You know, I was always just kind of like, I don't know wrong, and I'm not going to rest until the wrong that was done against me is going to be righted. And you know, I could see myself having to go back to prison quite soon. I know you want to talk about this, but throughout last year, I engaged in another campaign of civil disobedience where I planted cannabis plants all across the city here in Cork, all across the country of Ireland, and I encouraged many others to do it. And this year, there's an ongoing campaign right now. Because our springtime is really kicking into gear now that the sun is out in full action. So anybody who's got stuff in the windowsill, been encouraging them to start getting them hardied up now and get them outside. But yeah, we've a big campaign of civil disobedience where we're encouraging people to be openly growing cannabis out there in public. We're encouraging. We've got a number of companies that have donated in kind of industrial hemp seeds, so that these are going to be really good seeds to just kind of feed the birds with, is what we're encouraging people to do. but again, hopefully the birds then might help us in our mission and pick them up and spread them even further to places that we might not reach. But yeah, that what we're hoping then is that there's going to be just popping up in public these cannabis plants, and that there's going to be kind of it'll be the talk of the town, and get people talking about the nonsensicalness of the guards having to come out, and remove the plants, the time, the resources there. Like I don't know if you're aware of who the Kinahans are here in Ireland. Is that name familiar to yourselves at all?
No, please,
no?
let us know who that is.
Yeah, the Kinahans, basically the American government made them even more famous than what they already were, because the Kinahans are an organized crime group here in Ireland. They're a crime family. And the American government, the DA, I believe, put a $5 million bounty on the heads of each of the members of the Kinahan cartel. But they're an Irish crime family that came to power because of the prohibition of drugs. They're, that's their bread and butter here in Ireland. But yeah, they're sorry, no, I kind of lost the point I was going to make about the Kinahans there, actually. Crap, anyway, yeah, that one's gone.
The U.S. government and McKinnon.
Yeah, the U.S. government made them famous. I knew where I was going with that, but I just kind of lost where I wanted to bring that point. But yeah, the U.S. government are putting out a massive bounty on them anyway. But they're going to achieve nothing. Like these guys, your man Daniel Kinahan, he's involved in the boxing world now at the moment. He set up his own boxing gym. He's cleaning his money that way. He's got all sorts of assets all over the world. But it's funny, like, these crime families, they come to power. The governments go out and they try to bring them down. Like they've put a $5 million bounty on each of the heads. But in reality, if you remove the Kinahans, like, there's just going to be another family come along. There's just going to be another crime group come in, and they're just going to replace them. And the problem is they're probably going to be more ruthless than the guys they're going to be replacing, because that's what's happened time and time again here in Ireland. Is anytime, like when we had kind of an influx of Eastern European gangs here in Ireland, kind of in the late 2000s and stuff like that, we seen bloodshed on the streets kind of go up through the roof, because the crime gangs that were here for the period, that they knew not to be creating too much trouble out there, I suppose, because that gets a response then from the authorities. But then when you kind of got these foreign gangs coming in, that they're going to have to fight for their turf, and they don't really have the same respect for the communities then. And, they escalate the violence. That in turn then means that the locals have to also respond in kind and escalate the violence. And we just see a really messy situation here now in Ireland, where we've got a number of organised crime groups that are in control of the drugs market, and they're pretty much untouchables. A lot of them are known, and nothing happens to them. Nothing happens to them at all. But sorry there now for losing my train of thought in that one. I don't know where I started on that one, but anyhow.
You started off on the Feed the Birds campaign. We actually had somebody in chat ask about that.
Yeah, we were talking about the Feed the Birds campaign, all right, yeah, and Kinahans came up throughout that. But yeah, I'll go back to the Feed the Birds campaign. I was recently in with the guards a month ago. They brought me in for a voluntary statement. They brought me in, put me into a cell, held me in a cell for about a half an hour, brought me into a room then and questioned me for about 3 hours, and then put me back in a cell for 15 minutes and then let me go again. Got a free pants off them that evening, actually, because I didn't want to take the rope out of my pants. So they gave me a free pants. I was like, yes, free sweatpants. Courtesy of the government.
Interrogated by the government, all I got was these sweatpants.
Yeah. But yeah, they brought me in for question anyway. So there's a file now being prepared for the director of public prosecutions, and I'm going to be up in court for that. There's 6 charges of cannabis cultivation there from last year. I think there's over 32 cannabis plants within those 6 charges. And that kind of took place in a number of different locations, including the City Hall here in Cork, outside of our...
Allegedly.
Allegedly. No, I'll probably admit to it. If I could, it's there on live on video. Like it was all done live on video, so it's just like that they're using my own. It was kind of funny enough actually when I was in for questionings because they opened up my social media and stuff, and they were like, is this you? And I was like, well, yeah, that's me. Yes. So they were playing my videos, and in fairness to the cops, actually, that they were kind of saying like that. They're saying, "Oh, you make some great points there in your videos." In fairness, yeah, it goes, we kind of feel bad having to do this, yeah. But it's like the old cliches, like, well, we're just doing our job. So yeah, I'm gonna be up in court for that anyway in the not too distant future. That will probably take them maybe a year or so to process it. But already this year, the campaign is in full swing. There's cannabis plants already going out there. I'm already getting images sent in to me from people with their seedlings and pots that are getting ready to be put out there across the country. So yeah, it should be an interesting one. We get the people talking again.
Well, if you do get arrested and held, we'll make sure we help the Irish campaign of overgrow the government over there as well.
Yeah.
And help you support that. So what advice do you have people that want to kind of take up the activism on cannabis legalization in their country? I know there's a lot of people in countries that are listening to this show. I know we have about 130 different countries on an average year that listen to the podcast. We've had an incredible response worldwide. And so what advice do you have for people that are trying to, kind of lead the charge in their own country? You've had a lot of experience kind of helping lead the way in Ireland. What advice do you have for them on how to get started?
Yeah, well, the number one thing I suppose really is like, do not be held back by fear. That's probably the most important thing. Is that's the worst thing you can allow to happen is for fear to overcome you, and for you not to stand up for yourself, for fear of whatever, being targeted or being singled out because you're speaking up. Don't ever let that get in the way. Then the next most important thing is find your community. Know that you're not alone. That there is others out there who do feel the same way as you, and they are as passionate as you too. So by speaking up, and by not being afraid and speaking up, you'll allow yourself to find your community. You allow others to find you, and through uniting like that, then you're stronger together. So power in numbers, and that's the way you through a grassroots effort, you can build a small, tight-knit local community of people who are committed and passionate about this issue, who will support one another. And through having these small local groups, link them up then with other groups, that mightn't be as local, they might be, a couple of towns over. And before you know it, you've kind of got a nationalized network of smaller, tight-knit communities that are all looking out for one another under the same kind of banner, that we are not criminals and we will not allow ourselves to be treated like criminals, and by uniting, we're going to make it much harder for that to happen. But until we unite, it's going to be so easy for the authorities to just kind of single us out and pick us out. I think it's funny in the grow community that the thing is like to not tell anybody that you're growing and all of this, to just keep it quiet, and there's a lot of sense to that. But at the same time, like you're really like putting yourself in a corner there in that one, because if you were to ever get caught, if that, tell nobody wasn't to work, if the electricity company, let's say, was to kind of see, hey, there's a spike there in your electricity usage or whatever the case may be, you might just be unlucky. Your neighbor might smell your cannabis, whatever the case may be. But you've just put yourself in a corner now where you've got no community around you. If you get caught, you're on your own. And it's a bit late then at that stage, to be kind of going out there. I suppose it's never too late, but it would have been much more beneficial if you found your community before you got caught. It'd be much more beneficial if you kind of had that support and that structure there before you ever needed it. Because you have to also extend that to others, because it mightn't be you who gets caught. It might be somebody else who gets caught, but they need you to be out there actively campaigning around them. And again, you can't be fearful of the authorities to do that, because in order to do that, you do have to be out there in the public sphere. You don't have to use your face. You don't have to use your name or anything like that, but you do have to set up social media accounts. You do have to organize days out in the public environment. You can't just only exist solely online. That's a great place to start. But you do have to actually have physical meetups as well, in order to kind of cement and strengthen those relationships and that community. But yeah, I suppose that's the most important thing. Really, is just finding your community and building that community, and just staying strong together. United we stand, divided we fall. I think.
So, why don't you tell us a little about your podcast and some of the awesome content that you're putting out?
Of course, yeah. I suppose that what I just started saying there, all of that is a nice segue into this, is because that's why I started my podcast, is to strengthen my community. Like I've been an activist, a campaigner for many years, and as I said, over those years, we kind of missed the opportunities where we kind of had people on board, and we never really strengthened the community. But through setting up the Martin's World, that allowed me to have a much more public, a much more public place, a gathering spot, I suppose, if you will, where the community can kind of gather and get information from, but also organize around. So that was the idea with the podcast, was to be our own media. Because for so long over here in Ireland, we were doing some incredible campaigns, we were doing some great activism, but the media weren't picking up on it. So me and a buddy were talking about it. This was supposed to be a 2-person show, but it ended up being Martin's World, because it was just easier just to go that way, as the buddy wasn't really as available as I was at the time. But just share my own experience was the idea. Just welcome people into Martin's World through just sharing Martin's World with them, just telling them, how prohibition has affected my life, how it's affected the other people in my life as well. That was the idea behind the show. And we just built upon that. 420 News became a part of the show then as well, where I was reading into the different cannabis news related stories from around the world. 90% of the stories were negative, covering articles from court cases and stuff like that. It was horrible enough old stuff, but quite time to time you get some nice positive gems in there as well. But the 420 News then that went on for quite some time. Then that was 3 times a week: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 420 Irish time. And we built a great community from that. I would have up to 60 people watching that stream live. Would stream for maybe an hour, sometimes 3 hours, hitting the bong throughout it, then engaging in civil disobedience throughout the show. That was another aspect of the Martin's World live streams. Was civil disobedience was always a present feature of it. I would always proudly show my cannabis on air, be kind of like, yeah, I've got cannabis here. I'm openly breaking the law right now. And I would hit the bong and stuff like that. And encourage other people, to be, defiant like that as well, by going out and talking to people about it more, and, being a bit more open about their own use about it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And there's been a great community grow around that. There's been people who engaged in the chat box there, which we call the hot box. And we extended the hot box then because there was just such a great crack happening within the hot box. People were really enjoying the conversations. We set up a Telegram 24/7 hot box. And through that now we've got over 50 members inside of there. And we've actually got members from New York, as far as New York and stuff like that, which is really cool. And it's really nice. It's a really nice community of people. Everybody says good morning to each other, good night and stuff like that. And we all kind of just share little bits of pieces of our day and stuff like that. It's a really cool community. And it's a nice chat group that kind of came off the back of that. But as I said, there's people who've met through that who might have been a county apart, maybe 100 kilometers or something between them. And they're now going meeting up with each other, and there's friendships being forged there that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the podcast. So for me to see things like that happen, it's just like it's the cherry on top, really. Like, it was kind of an accidental feature of the show, but I'm in awe of it as it happens.
That's awesome. that you're having that kind of success and building those types of communities. I think that's one of my favorite things about this podcast is that we have a really wonderful community that we built up over the years, and they kind of stick with us week after week. And after all these years, we're on our 6th year this year. So,
6 years, yeah. Oh,
yeah. How long have you been doing your podcast?
It's going to be the 2nd anniversary this month, actually. I'm not too sure what date exactly it is, but it's in May anyway. I started.
Congratulations, man! That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I should put more. I should be getting more content out, but sometimes the activism just kind of gets in the way of trying to organize interviews and stuff like that. But I'm sure people understand.
So, what are some of the interesting things that you've learned while doing your podcast?
I suppose really, I never seen myself as being a podcaster. Like I have no experience in this at all. As I say, I've done herbal science before this, 4 years honors degree there in herbal science. Before I done that, I was looking at GMP manufacturing of medical devices and things. So I know experience in media production or like fucking radio hosting or anything like that. So it was just something I kind of came into by accident. So I've learned an awful lot. I've learned how to use streaming software. Sometimes maybe not as good as what I should be able to have, but we learn as we go. But yeah, no, I've learned a lot of skills, video editing and stuff like that as well. It's been really cool, and I get my kids in as part of that then as well. I have some fun with the kids there on the side, doing some video editing projects and stuff because my youngest daughter, she's kind of into that creativity and stuff like that as well. So it's been cool being able to share that with them as well. And yeah, I suppose another thing I learned is that you never get used to strangers saying hi to you on the street either. You're like walking down the road and somebody will be like, "Hi, Marty, what's happening?" And you're just kind of like, "Oh, I am." My kids will be with me like, do you know him, Dad? And I was like, "No, he's just probably a fan of the show." like today we went to Subway. My daughter, after she finished her drama theater class, I brought her over to Subway. And as we were leaving Subway, this woman and her daughter were walking in, and this woman just kind of looked me dead in the eye, and she was just like, "Hi, Martin." And I was just kind of like, "Shit, should I know this person?" And I was kind of like almost embarrassed because I didn't. And she goes, "Oh, I follow you on Instagram and I watch your show." She goes, "I love your content you put out. I love everything you say. You're amazing. It's brilliant." And she goes, "Oh, and I'm Nora." She said her name then, by the way. And I was just like, "Oh, right, yeah." I kind of knew her then because she had messaged me once or twice through Instagram. But it's really cool when you meet people like this and they introduce you to your kids as well, because this woman that I met today, like you would never look at this woman and be, "That's a cannabis consumer," you know? But because look, we do stereotype ourselves, you know. We kind of look for the person with the beard and the weed leaf t-shirts and, you know, the Rasta gear or whatever the case may be. We do tend to stereotype ourselves, but that's something I've learned as well. Yeah, there you go. Rocking the dreads, love it. But yeah, that's something that I did learn is that man, we've such a diverse community of consumers out there that feck it, like we are guilty of stereotyping ourselves as well. And my mind has been blown on countless occasions when I've had people come up to me and be like, "Oh, I love your show. I love what you do. Great message. Keep it up," and stuff. And I just be like, I would never have in a million years thought you would have been a person who would have been a supporter of cannabis legalization, you know. And through that, I suppose I learned of how guilty I am of stereotyping our community ourselves. And yeah, I suppose that's something to be aware of as well. I suppose ourselves out there in our communities, again, you know, is by speaking out and by, you know, seeking for your community, you'd be very surprised who you find out there who's got an interest in cannabis too, you know. And it's crazy the missed opportunities that there is because of prohibition, you know, in terms of like social opportunities, people forging friendships there around cannabis. Two people might come together because they like cannabis, but through consuming cannabis, they find out they got this other interest, and look, they start a fucking book club, And next, before they've got 5 or 6 other people there who are also interested in this book, and they like cannabis too. It's like great, but we're missing those opportunities now because we're all hiding away consuming cannabis, and in our living room alone, and it's a missed opportunity. We've so many pubs here in Ireland. There isn't a town or village without a pub, and pubs are great. You go down to the pub, you can sit down and drink a pint if you'd like, or you can have a cup of tea if you like. You don't even have to consume alcohol. But what you get down there is you get to go down, you get to socialize with other people, you get to engage in a conversation about the day-to-day, whatever's going on within the village, within the nation, or what's going on the TV, the sports, just have a conversation. But as cannabis consumers, we're robbed of that opportunity. We can't go down to the local pub and sit down and have a cup of tea and roll up our cannabis joint or pack our cannabis vaporizer and engage in that friendly, idle conversation with our neighbors. And the damage that's doing to us, like our mental health, being robbed of this social opportunity. It's so enraging when I think about it. Like, but again, to come back and make it all positive again, Martin's World has really afforded that opportunity for these gatherings. Only 2 weeks ago, as I said, 420, we were out active there above in Dublin. Because of the show, I was afforded an opportunity to get together with some friends, fans of the show. But I definitely say more friends than fans of the show. But there was 6 of us in the room, and all 6 of us were growers of our own. All 6 of us were growers, and there was, I think, we had about 15 different cannabis strains going around the room at the time, and it was amazing. It was great. Everybody was just sharing cannabis, and we were all just consuming, and it was just like everybody was just so happy, and there was so like I don't know how you would say it, like when they were just sharing their cannabis, they were just so delighted to be able to share with somebody that, oh yeah, that's my cannabis, because they're all hiding the fact that they grow cannabis, like they're not able to open up, like I've been in that situation myself where you go down and you're with a few friends and they don't know you're growing cannabis, and you roll up one of your own, and you've grown it yourself, and they're like, oh geez, man, that's unreal, that's legal stuff, like tastes unreal, and you're like, and you can't tell them that you grew it yourself. You just can't.
You're like, dude, yeah, the guy really hooks me up. He grows the best shit.
That's it, like, but when you see, when you're able to see that and the growers' faces, that when they're able to share, that's mine. Like they're so proud of it. Like I do it with my own strawberries. I grow vegetables and stuff here, man, and like I love seeing a person's face when they eat one of my strawberries, and they're like, yes.
Yeah, you Europeans take that vegetable stuff super serious with their competition stuff. But I actually had a similar experience. We actually recently, I was back visiting family in Philadelphia and organized. I have a friend of mine that owns a bar out there, so we went and did a kind of a very last minute kind of hey growers, if you want to come out of the shadows and hang out, we'll all have a seed swap and have a good time. And it was really cool. We had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 people show up, and all of them were, seasoned veteran growers. We had a good seed swap for everybody, and everyone brought their Puffcos. In fact, I just broke down and bought one today because I've been traveling all around the state a lot lately, and
nice.
I wanted to make sure I had some kind of mobile way to dab, and I hate fucking dab pens, so I want to be able to smoke some good concentrate. So I actually broke down and bought one today. So.
And that's something that's really missing over here is concentrates. Like we get some really nice quality flour and stuff, but there's no concentrate scene because the price of flour is just so crazy that if you were to be putting it into concentrate, it's not affordable really. Like,
what speaking of which, what are some? And this was a question from chat. What are some of the popular cultivars there in Ireland?
Star Dog is probably one that you might hear a lot about. That's a popular one with commercial growers, especially in the UK. So it's kind of one that gets ripped on a lot. People kind of make fun of it. Oh, Star Dog again. They kind of get annoyed about it. Yeah, and it depends then as well. We had situations here in Cork. It was a funny enough one. My buddy grew some blue cheese, and he gave some to a friend of ours, I think he gave him like an ounce or something like that, and that buddy might have sold 4 or 5 50 bags up around the area anyway. And before long, like everyone was selling blue cheese. It didn't matter what they had; they just were selling blue cheese now because like that blue cheese went around and it blew a few fellas' minds, and everybody, had to be saying now that they were selling blue cheese. It was just, it's so funny. So like, I think we don't really have a proper market here. We just get a lot of people just like whatever's something trendy to go on. So like at the moment, there's a big problem here with Cali. I don't know if you hear much about that over in your side of the pond, but over here, um, Cali is a big problem because the markup that goes onto it, and a lot of the time it's not even Californian grown cannabis. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be imported in from California, Californian grown cannabis, and it's sold as a premium product. It goes for as much as 3.5 grams can fetch like for 120, 150 euro. Like you're talking about 50 euro a gram kind of thing. Like that's crazy. So I don't know. That's like about $75 or something like that. $70.
Yeah, it's like Japan prices right there.
Yeah,
They pay
yeah.
about 80 US a gram.
Yeah, and what's going on is there's a lot of this, the wish.com. So there's lots of the Mylar packaging coming in from wish.com. A lot of the burners cookies was a big one there for a while that was going around. What was that fucking Gary Johnson, is that the guy, the basketball player? That there was a strain name after a basketball player there for a while.
Oh yeah. Still kind of popular.
Larry Payton, is that the name?
Gary Patton. Something.
Yeah. Whatever the case may be, his one was going around there for a while as well. And there was a
Flavor
couple
of the
of
month.
yeah, that was it. Like, but again, it was just coming in off of wish.com. It was just repacked, UK grown, Stardog most likely. There was a big problem then as well with there's terpenes after being reintroduced to certain packs. So you might get like a kilo of cannabis, it might be some Stardog, and they might come along and just hit it with some fucking Girl Scout cookies, terpenes that they're able to buy commercially now. And a little drip of that stuff there will give a nice dose then to an entire kilo. And it kind of makes the flavor profile, it makes it seem more than what it really is. So there's a lot of that happening here as well in Ireland. People aren't really aware of that. I think that's maybe the more kinder side of the market getting hit with some of the terpenes, because we also have problems with the synthetics here then as well. So like it'd be great to be talking about strains and flavor of the months and stuff, but unfortunately we're not lucky enough here because of prohibition, and people still would be buying vape carts and edibles. It's probably much more prevalent but it's not unheard of for cannabis flowers as well to be tainted with synthetic cannabinoids, to add to the potency of the product to make it seem to be stronger than what it is. And they can do it because you can get these synthetics, cheap as chips. Like you can spray the stuff on to a couple of kilos again, and it will probably only cost you a couple of euro probably for the synthetics that you've sprayed on. That's how cheap the stuff is coming in from China. But it's a big problem here, and we're seeing cases where kids now are getting hospitalized because of contaminated edibles and stuff like that as well. It's a big problem, and it's a growing problem as well, because the media then are using that as an opportunity, to kind of fire shots then at the efforts for cannabis legalization. But in actual fact, it's much more an argument for legalization because it's under the watch of prohibition. Kids get access to these products. It's under the watch of prohibition. These products are getting contaminated with these much more dangerous substances. But the policymakers here aren't engaging in these conversations at all with us. They're doubling down on their efforts. They're kind of saying that the current approach to prohibition of drugs is a health-led one. That we're leading the way with the national drug strategy being a health-led approach to drugs. The decriminalization that I described earlier that they talk about, where the guards have a discretion at the side of the road, but it's never really actually used. They're kind of saying that this is a part of that health-led approach. But in actual fact, it's doing nothing. The problem is growing, John. The Kinhans there that I talked about a while ago. There's other gangs here as well in Ireland that are present, and the cannabis industry is basically the backbone of the drugs market. it's propping up the other industries, the cocaine market, the heroin market, because like if you're going to be selling some cannabis, like you're most likely going to be involved in a bit of cocaine there somewhere along the line, especially when you're talking bringing in the volumes of cannabis that's coming in. If you're involved in that part of it, which the majority of the market here is that the homegrown cannabis market part of the industry, it's making up maybe about 5% of the market here, I would imagine. I would imagine 95% of the cannabis here in Ireland is imported into Ireland, either from the UK or from further afield, from maybe places like South America and stuff like that, Spain, and other places. But I would imagine the cannabis grown in Ireland makes up about less than 5% of the market here in Ireland. So therefore, for me, I kind of see it as if you're engaged in that, then you're inadvertently then supporting these other kind of these other markets, propping them up too. And I've nothing against that. Look, if you wanted to have a conversation about that, I think, the treatment we receive as drug users, it's no different to the treatment a cocaine user receives or a heroin user receives. It's unjustified. I don't agree with it. I don't think a person should be criminalized for their behavior. I don't agree with criminalizing a person for the cocaine use or the heroin use. And I do believe the best way to tackle organized crime gangs, regulate the fucking market, take the money out of it. Like, let's talk about cannabis for a second. If we were to be all growing our own cannabis, like it's going to be very hard for an organized crime group to profit off of that. Like it's going to be very hard already. You see it in America, over in places like California, where the bottom is falling out of the market. The wholesale price of cannabis, it's not where they expected it to be. It's going much lower, and there's businesses they're finding it hard to keep afloat. So again, if a legit business is finding it hard to keep afloat, within the industry once it's regulated, what hope does an organized crime group have if a legit business can't do it? So again, the best way if you want to remove these organized crime groups who do no good to our communities, you regulate the bloody market. You allow the people to control it. I think there's a way in which we could regulate the supply of cocaine to people who want to use cocaine, as well as freaking heroin. If people want to be using heroin, I think we can regulate it and educate people, and it could be done in a way in which it can be controlled and not be associated with the current violence and bloodshed there is controlled with. And the harms associated with the use of these drugs will also, I would imagine, they would much more likely to be going down than up anyway. Because a lot of the harms that we do see with these drugs, it's through uneducated use of the drugs, abuse of the drugs, because the people who use them, they're out of the access to the services that would educate those people. And quite often or not, the drugs that they're using are contaminated, much like the cannabis is as well, But yeah, I kind of hope I didn't go too much off on a tangent there, but I do definitely think that no drug user should be criminalized for their drug use. And I do think every drug user should be provided safe, regulated access to their drug of choice, whatever that may be, whether it be fucking psilocybin mushrooms, whether it be cannabis, whether it be cocaine. Have you heard of Dana Larson? I'd imagine you have.
But I did want to touch on the fact that what you just mentioned is exactly what Spain and Portugal did. And they have safe use clinics, and they legalized all drugs, and they're down to like 18% of the drug abuse and people overdosing from before they had that policy. So it
was part of our campaign here in Ireland in 2014. Sorry. Sorry there. But in 2014, as part of our campaign with the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, we actually brought Professor João Glau. He was the policymaker behind Portugal's decision to decriminalize all drugs over there. And when we had him in Ireland, and we done a national tour, he actually done a tour with Mark Emery. If you believe it, it was an incredible tour. We brought him to UCC, to NUIG, and to Trinity College above in Dublin as well. So to all of the colleges in Ireland. But when we had Joe Glow here, I asked him, around his policy's decision to decriminalize all drugs, if he would, what has he learned about it and what would he do differently? And he said, well, he said that it was an experiment took on by Portugal for the European state, for the European community, he said. And he goes, it was a successful one. And he said that the next thing to be done now by the next European state who wants to do an experiment is to regulate the drug use, because he said that was a failing of the current Portuguese model, is the drugs are not provided to the drug users, that the drug users are still reliant on the organized crime groups to get their drugs, that their drug users are still being exposed to contaminated drug supplies. There's still the need for services like Cosmic Care, who are a harm reduction group over there in Portugal working at festivals and stuff like that. But they provide drug testing services for drug users. And their work, it wouldn't be as necessary if the drugs were regulated. It wouldn't be necessary at all if the drugs were regulated, because their work would be done as part of the provision of the drug. The drug will be tested before it gets to the drug user, much like any other substances tested, Like when you go to the local pub and you buy alcohol, when they're pulling that pint, if it says it's 6% alcohol, you be sure that's 6% alcohol you're getting in there. It's not going to be 5.5 or it's not going to be 7.5. It's going to be pretty much 6%, maybe within an acceptable margin of error, but it's certainly not going to be what those mentioned ones, a couple of percent out. That needs to be provided to all drug users. It's the same protection, and keeping the prohibition, it's only to the benefit of the organized crime groups.
In the United States, if you're listening to this podcast and you're wanting that same type of service in the US, and I believe they're also in Canada and I think Mexico now as well. There's a group called Dance Safe, and it started because a bunch of moms and dads that had lost children because they had done things that weren't what they thought they were, wanted a way that they know kids aren't going to listen to prohibition, right? We know that's not going to happen. So they provide a safe service where you can get free drug testing. You can mail away for them. If there's a big festival or event, even an underground event, you can actually have representatives come and they'll set up a booth for free and try to provide these services, and you just have to sign up for it. I used to host, allegedly I used to be quite involved in the rave scene out in the desert in Southern California, and we used to have Dance Safe people there all the time as well, because there was people there that were going to do what they're going to do, and we'd rather have them at least have the option of knowing what it is the fuck they're taking, because that's the safest way. Responsible consumption and informed consumption is the way that everyone can have.
This is the thing that remember is most drug users want to be responsible drug users, but quite often or not, it's the environment doesn't allow for it to happen, because to be a responsible drug user, you need to know about the drug that you're taking. And to do that, you have to be able to ask questions about that. Quite often or not, for quite some time, people were even scared to be Googling, certain drugs, about cannabis or something like that, to be learning about your dosage, because, oh, geez, the authorities might look at my Google history or something and I'd be targeted, and I'll get raided. You couldn't have a conversation with your doctor or anything like that, quite often or not, because of resources like Erowid. You definitely have heard of Erowid, I'd imagine. Like, that's where I done all of my learning.
Absolutely, yes. That's one of the best resources online for anyone that wants to look. In fact, let me pull that up and put that on the screen real quick, just because it is such a critical
but this is peer-to-peer education again, and this comes back to, again, responsible drug users. Drug users have been mistreated for so fucking long, but we see resources like Erowid, which again, it's a grassroots network of drug users who seen the need there for access to information that enables responsible drug use, because people who want to explore these different substances want to be responsible while doing it. That they want to learn about dosages, the pharmacological effects and stuff like that, and without resources like Erowid, people were in the dark about it, again, people like Alexander and Sasha Shulgin, like, geez, like the contributions that they've made to the body of knowledge around these different substances, that it's just invaluable, you know. And to think without these kind of resources like Arrowwood, people would have been much more in harm's way. So it's great, you know. It's a positive reflection of the drug using community out there. That look, we are very responsible. We've formulated these resources that have provided, you know, access to information that has undoubtedly saved hundreds of thousands of lives over the years, I would imagine, because information is power.
Speaking of which, they have an incredible bookstore on Arrowwood, where you can purchase books from them and
right.
help support the original authors. They also have free copies of T-Call and P-Call. So if you're into synthesis and you're, you know, more of a nerd, you know, they do have free versions of both of those books, which are kind of like the Bibles on synthesis and many other wonderful things, which we probably can't really get into without getting the YouTube.
I actually bought those books for the college library in CIT when I was in college as part of the work of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which I led in college. And the college rejected Pickle and Tickle because of the instructions within them that to formulate the books. And I was just kind of like, this is crazy that you're going to restrict these books, even though they're out there anyway, but because of the potential use, that despite the fact that the information there, while yes, it does enable people to concoct potentially dangerous drugs, but it enables them to do it in a safe way. It's like, surely you want them to be able to do it safely if they're going to do it. It was a mad one. I really wanted to engage more in a campaign around that, but it happened at a time when I was just leaving college. So I didn't get to really actively campaign to keep these books in the library there. But we did get them signed actually by Sasha Shulgin. My buddy brought him over. He got to go over and have dinner with the show at Sasha Shulgin's for East. They have a gathering around Easter time there. He was over there for an SSDP conference as well. I was supposed to be on that trip and I couldn't go because of my conviction for cannabis. Would you believe that? I couldn't go to Washington State where cannabis was decriminalized because I have a conviction for cannabis because my visa was rejected.
What I wanted to mention real quickly is that the reason why this website is so important is these are all user reports of dosages and experiences and preparations. So if you've never heard of something or you're ever considering consuming a substance that you may or may not have heard of, go here, read about people's experiences and appropriate dosages and actually do it in an appropriate and responsible manner in whatever it is that you're going to choose to consume. We're not going to get into specifics, but there's a high amount of knowledge on here that is all. They also have listings of medical databases and all kinds of other things as well, not just, you know, secondhand accounts, but also, you know, LD50s, which is the lethal dosages, addiction statuses, all kinds of other important law and policy and other things that really help you, you know, make the most informed choices with your own personal decisions when it comes to chemical consumption. Oh man, this is such a wonderful episode. Do you want to tell anybody any other things that you wanted to mention as far as activism or starting their own podcast? What are some of the other things that you've learned as far as podcasting over the years? You know, you've been doing this now for 2 years. How has your podcast kind of evolved as it's gone on? I know this podcast has changed significantly since we first started off in terms of format and a couple of other things. What are some of the things that you've kind of learned in your journey as a podcaster?
That I probably take on too much work, that my expectations are probably a bit unrealistic of what I'm actually able to achieve. As I said, I was doing a live stream 3 times a week with the 420 News, and I was doing interviews then as well, kind of around that. And on top of that, then I was doing activism, and I'm a dad to 3 kids now. My youngest is 6 months old. So yeah, I'm quite unrealistic about my expectations of what I can achieve with my time. But still, despite that, I achieved a lot over the time over the last 2 years. But I'm definitely going to take it a bit more easier now, I suppose, especially with the increased seizure activity there recently. I'm not going to put as much pressure on myself. But at the same time, I am as ever committed to my activism, to changing the laws as I ever have been before. And despite, the ill effects that it's brought on my health, I am going to continue to campaign to the best of my ability. So as part of that, I am going to be planting cannabis plants publicly again very soon. I have some seeds that are germinating now in a number of locations. I've got some here nearby, but I also have I've got a number of friends who have been very kind to allow me some space there to put in a couple of seed trays to get some seeds germinating. So we'll get some seedlings out there, and we're going to be very active with a campaign here in Ireland, not just Cork, but right across the whole island of Ireland. We're really going to get active on it at this time around. So there's going to be a lot of that happening, and there's going to be a lot more gatherings happening then as well. So there's going to be a lot more public gatherings of cannabis consumers. So publicly encouraging people to bring their own cannabis to a location, and we'll kind of have a little picnic, I suppose, is kind of what we're saying there for that. Yeah, lots to come anyway.
That sounds awesome. I know you're quite the edibles a person yourself. Do you want to talk maybe for a minute on different edibles or different things that you're a fan of down the edible space? Or if you don't want to talk about that, then that's fine too.
No, I've definitely fan of the edibles. To be very honest, I've to admit, edibles for quite some time made me very uneasy. I used to get an anxiety before I ate edibles because of a past experience. My first time I ever made the Rick Simpson oil. And Rick Simpson is another fucking hero who was really inspirational to myself and my own life. But through looking at his work, I learned how to do that extraction that he recommended. And I used it as he recommended as well, the naphtha, that solvent. I don't use that anymore. I go for isopropyl alcohol now because that's the only alcohol I can really get my hands on here.
It's pretty rare in the States you hear anyone using hexane or naphtha, but it does work.
It does, yeah, but it's probably not the most cleanest of solvents really to be using, especially when you're buying it as a paint thinner over here, and we call it white spirits. Yeah, it's not the greatest of stuff to be using, but yeah, I made some very potent cannabis oil at that time with some bud and shake that I had left over from a grow. And I made 12 cookies, and me and my friend, we ate all 12 cookies before we went to a yoga class one evening. And like, I think we put about 12,000 milligrams of oil into the 12 cookies. So there was about 1,000 milligrams of the Rick Simpson oil in each cookie. The potency of the oil is anyone's guess, anywhere from 50 to 70%, maybe higher potentially, because it was all high THC stuff we were using at the time. But the class, oh my God, I'll never forget it. That class, I could hear people laughing. There was no one in the room laughing. I could hear them laughing. I thought people were laughing at me because I was not keeping within the instruction of what was going on. I was gone completely dysfunctional. The yoga teacher knew before we went in that we were after eating the edibles, and we even offered her a cookie, and she graciously declined. Look, she was smart. But anyway, the intensity, it was crazy. I could hear people laughing, and I knew they weren't. My buddy, he was bloody given an eye pillow, and she left him going to Savasana for the entirety of the class. He didn't have to do any of the yoga poses. I was trying to do the yoga poses. I stayed in downward facing dog for the entire class. I'm pretty sure I didn't move from it. Like I'm pretty sure I was just stuck in that position. My buddy ended up missing 2 days of work after that yoga class. Anyway, he never woke up the next day, and then after he went back to sleep, he failed to wake up for work again the day after that. So there was a lasting effect from that. So anytime I had edibles after that, it brought on an anxiety because I was like, shit, am I going to go in too deep again this time? So I learned a respect though for them. Since then, we've got the dosages down much better. I don't overdose people as often now anymore. But it still tends, it can happen. People do, I do have a higher tolerance than most people. So
That's the
sometimes
same problem.
yeah, so when you make edibles to yourself and others tend to consume them, it doesn't have a positive outcome for those people. I brought brownies to a buddy's my buddy's stag party, and we were doing go-karting for the stag party, and one of the lads, and he only lit like I have a little piece of hash here, and like he must have had like a piece of brownie about that size, a small little nibble of the brownie. He was no more good. He couldn't even do the go-karting. He stayed over. He stayed across the road, and and he was folded up on the couch back at the where we were having the party. But yeah, we've put some noobs into the funny conditions. All right, like.
And shout out to my old friend Arno. I won't mention his last name for censorship reasons, so that maintains privacy. But his first name is Arno up in Canada. I forget which one of his birthdays it was, but we made cannabis infused Jello shots, and his girlfriend at the time was dealing with some medical issues. So we had all these extra clean plastic syringes that were they wash out whatever the medication was or whatever it was in it. We saved them to use for the Jello shots, because they're like giant, Jello shot appropriate, like you could fit like a full ounce of, a full Jello shot in them.
Was it actually
So I made a whole bunch of them.
shot, like?
Yeah. So we basically took a couple days and I made a tincture out of cannabis and a bunch of high proof alcohol, and then used that as the alcohol for the Jello shots. And the green ones were the cannabis ones. Well, somebody didn't know that there was different ones, so they just mixed all the different colored Jello shots into a giant bowl. And I was gonna put them out in a separate bowl with a label saying like, "Here, choose your poison," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was why they were different colors in the first place. And I went to go on a beer run and to go pick up a couple last supplies, and people started showing up and taking them. Well, we were playing poker, while we're waiting for people to show up. In the beginning of a party, you kind of looking for something to do to kill time, waiting on food to finish, and you got food prepped, and you're just waiting for it to cook and all that. And this kid is playing poker, and he just goes and flops straight down and slams his head into the table and just turns off. It was like someone just took the on-off switch and just hit the button.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because he had 2 or 3 of them and didn't know, and he had never had cannabis. He'd never even had an edible or smoked weed before. So
we had a very similar experience at a poker table another night. A buddy of mine, not a very experienced cannabis consumer, and he was after smoking a joint, and there was some drink consumed, but we were playing poker. And next, all of a sudden, like I know I was sorting the chips out to begin the game of poker. We weren't even playing poker. I was just after putting the chips out for everybody. And next, bang, his head came down on the table, and I was like, "What the fuck, man?" I was just after sorting the chips, man, because the chips just went everywhere, like because he hit the table so hard, like. But he went completely white, like like when they say he pulling a whitey, like he went white.
Yeah, his blood pressure crashed. Yeah.
Blood pressure crash, exactly. Yeah, no, and he returned to normal again afterwards. We all kind of laughed it off and everything. It was nothing serious, like the guy didn't die, like.
But yeah, on that note, so I'm a pretty seasoned smoker. I mean, I've hit this thing probably 9 or 12 times, with the Puffco since we've been talking. So I smoke a lot, right? Like, and on my birthday, back in March, we were out partying with some friends, and I was out with Brendan Rust and some other people, and we were waiting for a table at a restaurant, a nicer restaurant that we were having dinner at for my birthday, and we decided to hit somebody's Puffco, and man, I took like 5 or 6 hits of that, and it just bombed my blood pressure out completely, and I got real dizzy and real like zoned out. I had to ask for a cup of soda, and I had to like slam the soda to get my blood sugar back up, my blood pressure back up, and I had to like. It took me 5 or 10 minutes to like recover from it, and I haven't never had that happen to me before, but I'm 100% convinced that certain terpene profiles have that different chemical effect on people, and it was something where I made sure I wrote down what the name of that cultivar was so that I could try to research it later, but. I never had that experience, but now I started to understand what some people are starting to go through
Nice.
when they have their earlier
I
experiences.
wonder how much the environment adds to the experience, though. If you're out for your birthday, you're celebrating, you tend to hit it a little bit harder. Because I think I
Yeah,
had something similar recently above in Dublin, actually, because again, as I said, that there was the 6 different growers there at in the room. We all had our own different strains there. Everybody was like consuming. There was so much edibles brought there, and there became a point at the night where I actually was kind of, shit, I think I'm having a bit of a panic attack now. I think I'm like, I was like freaking out a little bit. think we got a little bit too high. But I think it was just because of the intensity of the situation, and as well, you're like, everybody was just, just buzzing.
yeah, but I think people often kind of overlook that, especially with people that have allergies. A lot of people know they're allergic to lemons and citrus, and then they go smoke limonene cannabis that has a lot of limonene in it. They have a negative reaction. I've even seen people have full-on anaphylactic shock from high limonene strains. I had a customer I used to work with that was hyper allergic to limonene, and it's something that people need to be aware of with cannabis because it does produce so many different terpenes that if you know you're allergic to a certain food group, avoid cannabis that is high in those terpenes that also have that. If you're allergic
100%.
to mangoes, maybe don't smoke high indicas because indicas are generally high myrcene strains, which is also a high terpene in mangoes. So
Yeah, 100%. I tried to have this conversation with a lecturer of mine back in the time when I was doing the herbal science course. As I say, I faced a bit of stigma when I was doing that course because I insisted on wanting to do research on cannabis, doing projects around cannabis. And one of those was looking at synergistic effects of cannabinoids and terpenes, looking at the different pathways that are activated by the terpenes, which ones are active, which ones are known to be active, and stuff like that. And one of the researchers, yeah, she was doing her PhD, I suppose, but she was our lecturer. She ridiculed me one time because I wanted to do another project on cannabis. And she said, "Oh, why'd you consistently want to do work on cannabis? Isn't there other plants out there?" And it's just like, what other plant out there has got offered like so much variety of compounds within it? I was like, why wouldn't I want to research this and add to the body of knowledge that's out there at the moment? And she just couldn't. She was big into her mullein verbascum mullein. It's a nice alternative actually to be used instead
great.
of tobacco. But that's another story.
Well, yeah, no, well, so we're a big proponent of mullein. I know when I got COVID real bad,
Yeah,
within a couple of hours of starting to smoke mullein pretty heavily again, I could breathe better, and
yeah,
I could actually kick a lot of the phlegm out, and I could actually kind of regain a lot of the purpose usage of my lungs. And I've also noticed that too with when I get kind of chest colds and things like that, you can smoke some mullein and it just clears your chest out really, really well. It's an antibiotic. It's
yeah.
really good. And I've also had a coworker when I used to work back at the Aquaponic source, the guy in shipping. He was a devout evangelical, didn't drink, didn't smoke. But we used to go mushroom hunting, and I taught him a bunch of herbalism. So he knew I knew what I was talking about in terms of medicine. So he had a chronic bronchitis for the last 8 or 9 years. Every time the fall would come around, he'd get bad bronchitis. So I gave him went out and bought him a nice glass pipe, and I gave him like an ounce of organic mullein that I had picked from, or maybe, I think it was probably more than that, but maybe a QP of organic mullein that I had picked from my own, wild foraging up in Colorado, up in the
Nice.
mountains, and dried it and cured it. And he smoked it, and after that, he no longer had any more chronic bronchitis. To this day, he still doesn't have any more bronchitis issues, and it's because he was never fully curing that infection, and that getting that mullein, either for children use the tincture, You can buy it at most drugstores or herbal stores, sections of your supermarket. Rub it on their upper lip like you would Vicks Vapor Rub or some other, aromatic, and just let them breathe it in. It can help children that way. And then for adults, smoke it. It'll work better. Obviously, you don't want to smoke with children, obviously.
Yeah, for obvious reasons. But still, with the kids, there is the option of vaporizing as well. I know people don't want to be getting their kids to smoke, but at the same time, there is a lot of benefits there too.
Yeah, Mullen, especially if you're treating pneumonia or respiratory issues, is really good even in a vaporizer. Absolutely.
Yeah, so something like the volcano there is a really cool device, especially as well if you to be working with a kid. You could like sit the child down, and you don't even have to have them to directly inhale it, but to just release the vapor around them and let them breathe in the vapor. In terms of aromatherapy, like man, the potential there is it's huge. But that was a part of the conversation I was having with this lecturer. But she was much more interested in only wanting to talk about Mullen. There's like, no, there's no potentials there for cannabis. Cannabis is a dangerous drug, and we can't talk about this. And oh my God, I just couldn't get over it. That's where we were at that stage, and like even within the herbal science field. And it's probably because actually the course itself, cannabis, like was always a bit of a dogma, I suppose, of the course. Like people like within the course always kind of, if you say that I was doing herbal science, you would get the raised eyebrows. Oh, herbal science, yeah. Oh, you must be one of those, like but it was always kind of implied, that if you're doing herbal science, you must be into the cannabis. So there was a number of petitions actually throughout the years to have the course name changed to applied plant biosciences, I think, or something like that. But it was on an unsuccessful campaign. It remained herbal science, the name. I preferred it. I like herbal science because I was able to refer to myself as a herbal scientist.
Right. And
Yeah.
if cannabis is a gateway drug, it's certainly into herbal medicine. I know there's quite
For
a
me,
few people I've met in
100%.
the cannabis industry that I've then gone out to take out for. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I took out Brandon Rust and Jordan River from Growcast
Excellent.
out on their first mushroom forage together. Or the three of us went out and I taught them how to find morels. So it's a gateway drug to better health and herbal medicine. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah, I wish there wasn't such a body of water between us. I'd love to go mushroom foraging with you. That'd be
Oh
class.
yeah, man. Heck yeah. I can definitely turn you on if anyone wants to learn more about mushroom hunting. I highly suggest the couple of different resources, which actually I think would even work where you are. There's an app called iNaturalist. It's available on both Apple and Android and Windows Phone, I think, if that's still a thing. But it is on, and as well as the website as well. But if you're trying to find out different insects, mushrooms, plants, trees, whatever, that's the website. You can find local reports of those same types of plants and narrow down exactly what it is that you're looking at, that you're holding in your hand. And then also a Mushroom Observer is a website that you can find online that has a really good resource as well, where people report different mushrooms from all around the world and what they are in terms of ID. And they have lots of seasoned mycologists on there that help, double check them and things like that.
Yeah, you can never be too safe and going out foraging mushrooms. Like I always know what the lookalikes are. Always.
But the nice thing about mushrooms is people often think they're like super toxic. There's only one mushroom that's not toxic or super toxic to touch, and it's in Japan, and it's very rare. So unless you're in Japan, you can pick up anything, even if it's super poisonous, and not have to worry about it. Also, most of them, even the poisonous ones, you can taste. So you can take a bite of it, chew it a little bit, taste it on your tongue, and spit it back out. Even if it's a poisonous one, even a death angel is completely non-toxic as long as you spit it all out.
Yeah.
So even when we test things like Rusula mushrooms in Colorado, for example, there's a sickener and a wine cap. The sickener has a bit of a spicy taste to it, but you spit it out and there's no negative impact. Whereas with the wine caps, they taste good and you keep them and it's fine. So they're not as dangerous as I think people make them out to be. Again, as long as you don't swallow them, that's the important part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I actually finished the herbal science course, we finished by entering into a competition. It was called Student Inc. And I entered a business idea with a business partner at the time who unfortunately got sick and had to go and focus on his health. So the business didn't kind of go forward together as a partnership. But it was the super fungi. That was the name of our company. But it was basically incorporating extracts from mushrooms into different food items. So our kind of running product was cacao blend, blending mushroom extracts with cacao and maca root. So the blend was basically to be used as kind of like a hot chocolate blend. Mix it with a little bit of coconut milk or something like that, or even just normal milk or dairy-free alternatives if you wanted to. Jeez, man, I just thinking of all the pitches actually we had to make, and they did be hitting on the trendy milks and stuff like that at the time. I'm just a normal dairy guy. I was easily pleased. But yeah, that was our thing. It was the mushroom extracts was the primary focus. It was getting people to incorporate these as they were kind of seen as the trendy thing. But yeah, there was a massive fungophobia we found. Like people had a fear of mushrooms. Like if you were to talk to people about mushrooms, you either got one reaction was magic mushrooms, or the other reaction was like, aren't mushrooms dangerous? You know, it's like kind of. And the other reaction was just kind of like, oh, it was like what the white mushrooms? Like people just think mushrooms are the white mushrooms. You know, the things you eat for the breakfast mushrooms. You know, the what's that? The agaricus species. Like people don't realize like there's so many species of mushrooms in terms of like the oysters, shiitakes, pepinos. You know, there's so many varieties out there. So that was something I learned at the end of that the fungophobia, that there was a massive fungophobia out there. There's like as much as a fear of cannabis there was out there, there was like a much greater fear of mushrooms.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in the United States, there's only, I think 5 or 6 that can actually kill you, and you still have to eat a decent amount, with the exception of the Death Angel and 1 or 2 others. Those are pretty small consumption, and you're having an issue. But all the others, you have to consume a pretty large amount to really die from them. So,
Yeah.
it really is kind of a fear that it really isn't warranted to the level that it's often taught.
Yeah, there was something though. You obviously heard of Paul Stamets, and I don't know if you heard of his interview when
I
he was
met him
on.
actually.
Have you? Oh, you lucky ducky,
Yeah.
man. No, I've only been lucky enough to read his books and hear him in video format online and stuff. But I was listening to his podcast that he done with Joe Rogan, and he said something, and it's always been on my mind. Like, but he talked about that agaricus species of mushroom, and he said that if he was to eat it, he'd make sure he'd cook it at a high temperature. And he talked about that quite specifically, but he said that he couldn't talk anymore about it because he'd get in trouble. And why you get in trouble, like, is that's the most widely consumed mushroom across the world, the agaricus species, that white one, because it also turns into the portobello mushroom, and it's also used as the chestnut mushroom as well. But it's the one species, the agaricus species. But he talked about it when it's in that white kind of button mushroom format. They cook it at a high temperature. But he said so, it was something he said, and the way he said it, like it always just made me wonder, like what does he know about this mushroom that he's not saying, and why did he say cook it at a high temperature? I've always nuked them since I've started cooking them, and I actually enjoy them much more now. They're much more tastier when you really get a nice browning on them. But yeah, he said that, like, but yeah, Paul Stamets is the man when it comes to mushrooms. So if he said that, like, but again, he's got all these kind of things with the FDA and with the Department of Defense and stuff like that. So I wonder what is it that he knows and who he doesn't want to get in trouble with by saying something about those particular mushrooms.
Right? There's always stuff that they're not telling you, for sure.
Yeah. But it's like 95% of the mushrooms consumed consist of that species, like, and something like that. It's crazy.
The button creminis, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's always, I love hunting wild mushrooms because my favorite thing is watching people's expression on their face when they taste their first wild mushrooms, because they've never tasted mushrooms that had flavor before. Not flavor, but I'm talking like loud flavor, like that has its own unique, each one has its own unique taste and flavor that's very different than anything they've ever experienced before. And then they suddenly realize there's this whole other world of vegetables in this mushroom world that have a very, very unique expressions of different flavor profiles. And chicken of the woods tastes different than morels, tastes different than chanterelles, tastes different than porcinis, and so on and so forth. So
Oh no, 100%. Yeah, I thought you were actually going to say that the look on people's faces when they see you picking the mushrooms. I've gotten some queer looks off people here in Ireland when I've been out picking mushrooms in the forest there, picking some of the local chanterelles now and stuff like that. Not the psychedelic varieties. They don't really grow in the woods here. They grow more in the fields. You also get funny looks when you're picking them too. But I've had some people coming over and they're kind of like that they would be very, very like curious as to kind of what you're doing as well. But also kind of a bit shocked, like, oh, you're out here, like, why don't you just buy him from the shop? People are very out of touch. I think still where the food comes from. I think convenience, people's lifestyles. That's just more of a curse than a blessing at times. I think,
Oh yeah, but and that's something I think people need to go back to is look, if society does ever break down, you need to know what plants are good herbal medicine and good food and all the rest, because you might have to rely on those skills.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that even here now at the moment because of this whole Ukraine-Russia crack that's going on. That a lot of the European market here was reliant on, say, the wheat and some of the animal feed products that would have come out of Ukraine, that are not coming out of Ukraine now, and that's kind of putting an added pressure then on the different industries. I keep chickens and stuff like that myself, and I did notice that there was a bit of an increase in the price of a bag of chicken feed and stuff like that. So there's definitely people need to be a bit more aware of as to how reliant we are on other places and stuff like that, and maybe the importance of supporting more local kind of food economies. Because again, there is no reason why we shouldn't be producing more mushroom species locally, because again, here in Ireland, we've got a pretty active wood industry. A byproduct of the wood industry is sawdust, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be collecting that and be using that to be producing our own mushrooms here locally. A lot of the mushrooms that are produced there in Ireland, any of the exotic ones are actually imported in from France. There's only one company actually in Ireland that are growing any exotic mushrooms. But yeah, geez, we're kind of really going off topic there on the mushrooms now, aren't we? Oh, I try not to leave it on silence. I think we're live out there with other people anyway. Welcome back.
Sorry about that. I had
oh, good, oh, good.
Dogs from outside.
Oh yeah, you're all good.
No, so I know it's getting quite late there. Is there anything else you want to mention? I'll throw your website back up here so people can find you. How can people listen to your show here if they want to tune in?
Of course, yeah. The show goes live through Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So you'll find me on those platforms. I'll go live on those for the 420 news. Over a number of seizures I've had there recently, I've not been as active with those live streams, but I do intend to return to them soon. So you'll find me on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook for those live streams. Also over on Instagram as well. I have an account over there, but I don't tend to be as active over there. Bloody thing I hacked actually recently, and I just got it back. But do definitely give me a follow if you're on Instagram as well. You'll find me on Twitter as well. And over on the website, which is up on the screen there as well, you see the 420 News blog. I tend to rewrite some of the news articles here. It's a shameful thing we do here in Ireland is the names and addresses of individuals who get caught growing cannabis get printed in the media. So I go about rewriting some of those articles through the 420 News blog, and I remove the individuals' names and addresses from the articles so that people have a more friendly, shareable article, so that we're not kind of further punishing people by, doxing their names and addresses out there for the crime of growing cannabis or being in possession of cannabis. So that's some of the news blogs that get posted up in the 420 News blog. Anywhere else then? No, I think that's pretty much everywhere then, yeah. Anywhere you find podcasts as well, like Spotify, iTunes and things like that. There's audio versions of the interviews I do. I don't release the 420 News that I do live as an audio version because I tend to rely on video a bit. So I don't release audio only versions of that. So you'll only find my interviews in audio only versions there on anywhere you find your podcasts. But yeah, do definitely, boys, people should subscribe anyway, because I do intend to be very active over the coming months. So on any of those mentioned places, you will be seeing a lot more content being going up very soon. That will be highlighting the Feed the Birds campaign, the Overgrow the Government campaign, the civil disobedience campaigns that are active and ongoing here in Ireland. Some of them I'm leading, others I'm a part of a group of other activists. So it's not just myself. We have the Cannabis Activist Alliance here in Ireland, which is another group that people should be aware of, and find that they're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch and stuff like that as well. Again, it's a group of activists who've come together. They formed that group. And again, through that group, again, I mentioned it earlier in the show, we're forming an alliance, uniting people and allowing people to have a platform in which they can kind of speak from and find support there from a community of people as well, if they find themselves on the wrong side of the law there. Other groups as well in Ireland, Crown is another group. It's kind of an offshoot of Trees, the Trees subreddit. I think it's kind of a big subreddit over there, but an Irish offshoot of that is Crown, Crainn. That's another Irish group who are getting active over here as well. And they're worth paying attention to as well. That they have a nice group going over on Reddit, yeah, they're getting active as well, getting out, engaging with the public with fact-based campaigns. They're printing off leaflets and stuff like that. So they're doing some good work as well. So there's many other groups out there as well getting active here in Ireland, which is great to see. It's great to see more groups coming out there and getting active. And I hope to see more groups as well come on the scene very soon. I know myself, I do have got some other plans, and I suppose one of those actually is I hope to go forward with a bit of a kind of a cannabis dispensary of some sort there very soon. Just start openly kind of selling cannabis in defiance of the law. We're going to come up with some way of doing it. All right, we're going to do it maybe in some sort of a club model, where we kind of unite growers and consumers together, where everybody's happy with the agreement that's there. And if the authorities are to get involved, everybody's going to be going down as part of it. It's not just going to be the grower. It's going to be the grower along with the consumers there. So it's going to be kind of a bit of a honeypot, I suppose, if you will, for the cops. If they come and stick their hands in, they're going to get stung, and we're going to be ready for them. So there's nice campaigns like that we're working on. And look, let's hope that they don't stick their hands into the honeypot. That's something that we don't want. Let's hope that we get these little collectives that we're trying to form up and running, and they don't get interfered with the authorities, and they are successful in achieving what we want to do, which is get high quality, low cost cannabis to consumers out there, lovers of cannabis, because the cost of cannabis shouldn't keep you from being able to enjoy it. And I think it's because of the prohibition, the cost is just way out of control at the moment. Again, I grow cannabis myself, and can produce cannabis for as little as 20 cents a gram. There's no reason why you should be paying as high as €50 a gram for that. Like that markup there, that's prohibition. That's only prohibition. There's no reason for that markup only other than prohibition. So that's what we hope to change.
wonderful that you do a whole hell of a lot for the community there in Ireland, and they're certainly awesome to have you.
Yeah, well, we're very ambitious anyway, what we hope to achieve. And again, if you don't dream it, it's not going to become a reality. So yeah, we're going to continue dreaming it, and we're going to make it a reality very soon.
Very cool. All right, thanks a lot. And you want to tell everybody how to find you one last time?
Yeah. Martin's World. Anyway, if people go to martinsworld.ie, all of the links are up there as well for the socials. So the Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think I even have a TikTok. My daughter set it up for me. She keeps telling me you should do more TikToks, Dad. There's lots of kids will follow you. And she's dead right, dude. In fairness, what she was saying, my daughter's actually only she's going to be 9 now in July. But like she's a big supporter of what I do, and she wants to come out and protest me and everything. But she gives me great pointers there and stuff, and she's like, yeah, you should get on, and she should be you should educate kids about cannabis, Dad, because they don't learn about it in school or all. She'd be saying and all of this, and when they do learn about it, they don't tell them the truth, do they, Dad? So yeah, it's funny hearing that from her. I was blown away one day.
You should write the cards, and she should read them, and have kids teach kids.
There you go. Exactly. That's what era it is, isn't it? Like there's the peer-to-peer thing, like kids teaching kids as well. That's true. That's a good one, man. No, because she blew me away one day when I was walking down the road. She said it to me just kind of out of nowhere, as kids do. We're just kind of conversing, and she goes, "Dad, can I go to your next protest? Which I really want to help you get the laws changed because I don't want the guards to take you away." And man, it almost brought me to tears. I don't I don't really hide like my emotions from my kids, but at the same time, I don't want to be a big crybaby in front of my kids too. Like, but man, it was very hard that evening for that not to bring a tear to my eye when she said that, because I don't want that for my kid. I don't want my kid that wanting to be like it's great, that she is doing that, but it's just like, man, she shouldn't be thinking about that. Like she should be fucking thinking about, I don't know, like rainbows and sunflowers and all of those nice things, like in life. Like not about her dad getting taken away by the guards because he uses a plant and it benefits his life. And it's like it's so annoying that she's caught up in the middle of all of this. Like, but it's really nice to know that she's got my back as well, though.
Especially you as a patient who suffers from epilepsy, uses it as medicine as well. It's a whole other no one should have the right to deny you for medicine that works, and we never got to vote for these opioid dispensaries. Why should they deny you from your medicine? Yeah,
that's so true. Like, it's mad. It's just we could go on about this all day, really, like, because like over here we've got like fentanyl, like it's dispensed, and they're starting to hand out Oxycontin now and stuff like that to people at the moment there as well. And they do it without even batting an eyelid, like. But meanwhile, when it comes to the cannabis, like it's like, no, you have to try all of the other drugs before we even consider you eligible for use of cannabis.
And why should you have to suffer through all the toxicology of all those other compounds before you come to one that isn't toxic?
Yeah.
That's complete. And some of them have long-term side effects that aren't reversible, and that's criminal. They shouldn't force that on you.
And before I go, actually, and I feel bad for not bringing them up sooner, is that the Patients for Safe Access is a group I'm actually a director of with other patients, myself, Kenny Tynan, Alicia Maher. Kenny Tynan had a brain tumor, and he's successfully been treating the brain tumor with cannabis, and I believe he done a couple of rounds of chemotherapy as well. But I think he's successfully treating that now, and that the tumor has been reducing in size. And I don't think that the latest is that they can't find his tumor now at the moment. He's a director of the Patients for Safe Access with me, and also Alicia Maher, then, who I mentioned. Alicia Maher is a woman who is in her 30s. She was doing a degree in law, but she had to stop that and leave Ireland recently because the lack of access to cannabis, it was just too much for her to take. She was illegally accessing cannabis here through friends to treat her issues of chronic pain. they began because of complications that arose over straightforward enough removal of your tonsils. You go in, get your tonsils removed. You think that's going to be straightforward enough old thing to happen. She went in at 17, but complications arose. She got an infection. She had to go back in. She ended up with contracting, I believe, MRSA while in there, which is like serious Staph aureus infection, like that's like medicine resistant. That led to other medical complications anyway, which led to her like having like precancerous cells start to arise and everything. Like, oh, it was a horrible story that what she went through. She was living like a non-existence, really. Like, she was medicated to the hilt, and the medication wasn't even working. For a friend recommended she tried cannabis. She tried it. The difference was day and night. Her quality of life, it was tremendously improved. She was able to come off of the medications, reduce her reliance on the opiates, which weren't working anyway, and were only reducing her quality of life. She turned her life around with cannabis. And unfortunately, the access was just too poor here in Ireland, and led to her having to leave in the middle of doing her law degree as well in the University of Limerick. She left Ireland and moved to Spain. She's the director of the Patients for Safe Access with myself as well. We're going to be doing a conference on the 11th of June here in Ireland, above in Dublin, in the Sugar Loaf or something like that. The Sugar Lounge, I think it's called. It's a venue above in Dublin anyway. I think it's called the Sugar Lounge. I should know that, really. But that's going to be on the 11th of June. I think there's a €10 fee associated with the tickets there as well, just to cover the costs of the venue and getting speakers there and stuff like that. But again, it's going to be a day of action around patients. It's going to be getting information out there, sharing patient stories, also getting in industry experts, getting in policymakers as well, bringing them to the table for the discussion. So hopefully it should be a great day, a great conference, and hopefully it'll lead to some positive change there if the policymakers actually show up and engage with us, which is the hope. The invitations have been sent out anyway. But the Patients for Safe Access, it's a group that we set up as patients, set up by patients for patients. We're a believer in the kind of the grow your own as a model, patient-led cooperatives as well, where patients work with other patient growers, where patients are kind of more in control of their medicine there, because currently, the way in which it's been done, it's been led where it's kind of, GW Pharmaceuticals, Sativex, Marinol is kind of the preferred approach here. But that's not suitable because, again, we have patients like Alicia Maher who are already accessing cannabis illegally through growers, through friends, and are successfully treating their conditions. So we would be in support of continuing and supporting models like that gets high quality, low cost cannabis to patients as well. So that's another group I just had to get in a mention for them as well, and the upcoming conference there on the 11th of June.
Well, thanks for mentioning a bunch of ways people can help support the movement as well. That was going to be one of my last questions for you. So
yeah, well, Americans for Safe Access, I believe, is a group. We're working with Foxworthy Farms. Martin O'Brien, he's a Cork man. He went over there leading the way in the rave scene back in the 70s and the 80s, I believe. And then he found his way down to I believe he's down in the Sonoma Valley now in California, and that's where he's growing his cannabis now. But he was leading the way down there with the Berkeley Patients Care Collective, I think, was one of the first collectives down there after the Prop 215 or whatever it was passed. So we're working with Martin O'Brien. He's another director of the Patients for Safe Access as well. So he's leaning over and giving his expertise and helping us as well as others from the Americans for Safe Access too. So it's great. There's great assistance there across the pond coming over already helping us here. So any more that comes, it's going to be greatly appreciated too.
That's awesome. I didn't realize they were doing that. Really wonderful.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you see an event? I don't. I was remembering one of the great activists of gone, Mary Jane Rapon. otherwise known as Brownie Mary. She would have been an activist back in the scene in where's San Francisco, I believe it was. I think in that scene, she was providing cannabis to the gay community then at the time, because there was a bit of an epidemic of AIDS within that community, and obviously cannabis was very beneficial for the AIDS patients. But she openly provided cannabis to the patients, and herself, Dan Perron, and a couple of others. They were.
Dennis, I knew Dennis Perron the last 2 years of his life. And actually, I'm still good friends with Wayne Justman. So.
Yeah. I'd love to speak to some of these people, who are involved in that. So if any of them are out there watching this, send them my way.
I can definitely get you in touch with Wayne. He loves to do interviews. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So as part of, I remember the Mary Jane Rap one, what I done last year on her birthday, I went into the city here in Cork and actually gave out a load of free brownies to people. I implied that they were cannabis brownies, but in actual fact, that they were just plain brownies. But I did have a friend nearby who did actually bring some cannabis brownies with him. And anybody who asked specifically and who looked of age, I kind of directed them to that guy. But it was kind of, again, another little honeypot operation. We were going to sting the cops. Hopefully they'd come down and maybe take the thing. And, there was going to be no cannabis within the brownies and stuff. But there was a lot of underage people who came, and they took brownies there again on the day. And it allowed us an opportunity to talk about, we always kind of get told as kids, don't take candy from strangers and stuff. But again, because of drug prohibition, if a kid wants to engage in consuming some cannabis edibles, well, they've got no choice but to take kind of sweets from a stranger in most instances, because you're not going to be cooking up some edibles at home yourself if you're a teenager, because it's not really something that you can easily do and conceal because of the obvious reasons, the smell and stuff like that. And obviously, doing a slow cook, imagine being a teenager and trying to do a 3-hour slow cook with some butter and bud. Like when I was a teenager, I was lucky enough to be able to make some Nutella and toast. But yeah, so there's this there was always these opportunities there through these different campaigns, So while I was remembering a great activist, I was also using it as an opportunity to make some points as well, while remembering these great activists. And I love looking at people's work like that as well, because I take some great inspiration to the work that these people done in the past, and to what the change that it led to, without these bold actions, we wouldn't have seen a change, without the Rosa Parks sitting down and refusing to give up our seat. Where would the world be, without the fucking Mahatma Gandhi and the peaceful civil disobedience protests that they led over in India at that time, where would that country be? There's so many instances we could point to when there was wrongs befalling large populations of people, and it just took the actions of one or two people just to kind of say enough is enough, and to stand up, and through their actions, then movements, rebellions, that they rose up. And I think that Ireland is not far off at that point now. I think, if they come after me, I think they're going to martyrize me at some point, and I think that might be a mistake that they'll make. I think, anyway. We'll see.
You're right. I was trying to pull up a picture here. We'll see if it loads or not. If not, then that's okay too.
Well, I suppose, I've made it very difficult as well for the authorities here now, because my show, I suppose, it's gotten quite a decent following. I've over 2,000 subscribers now on YouTube. On Facebook, I've got up to 6,000 followers. Instagram, another 2,000 over there. And I've gotten national coverage on my campaigns there last year on a number of occasions. So I'm quite a known person over here now, infamous, I suppose, maybe, if you will. So if I am to be brought to court for, say, the acts of cultivation, the public civil disobedience, they're going to be quite public trials, and they are going to gather a lot of attention because I'm going to be publicly publicizing them through my own platforms. But I do hope that the media will continue to pick up on them as well. Oh,
There you
nice.
go.
There you are.
That was last
And Dennis.
Thanksgiving. You know,
Nice.
last Thanksgiving he was with us. Yeah, good group of people. Awesome group of people, actually.
And there's so many people I said I didn't get to meet, but yeah, it's unfortunate, you know. Oh, you're muted there.
No, thank you so much for coming on, man. I definitely I'm glad to have you on, and I'm certainly you know, I wanted to have you on for quite a while to help, you know, kind of promote you and get your word out on what
Thanks.
the awesome work that you're doing, and I'm super glad that we finally were able to get you on.
Yeah, well, I hope people enjoy the conversation, and yeah, I've people want to follow up and any questions or anything like that in the future, I'd gladly come back on and have another conversation with you, because I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoy talking to people about cannabis and about my own experiences and stuff like that, about activism, because I really do hope that, you know, that there's a little nugget that's going to get into somebody, you know, there's going to be a little seed that's going to be planted, and that's going to blossom into something great out there, you know, that one of these little community groups that I talked about earlier, you know, that one of those might form and that might grow into something great, you know. So it just it makes me happy knowing that, you know, you're allowing me that opportunity. So thanks.
One question, actually, you kind of reminded me of something we talked about before we went live. If you want to talk about it for a second, someone asked you if you knew much about aquaponics, and I thought that was kind of funny because we kind of talked about that beforehand, and we actually haven't talked about it yet in the whole interview, and it's kind of funny. Do you want to touch about that for a minute, because that was actually kind of really intriguing to me, and you and the more people I talk to, the more people I know. Chris Trump started with aquaponics. Josh from Dutch Bloom started with aquaponics.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about your journey and your experience with aquaponics.
Yeah, I love the concept of aquaponics, and I thought it was really cool. And I don't have any hands-on experience with it. All of my experience with it is just from reading it in books. But yeah, I think incorporating aquaponics into the living soil, it's a really cool system. And again, when it comes what we talked about earlier as well about localizing our food networks, great opportunity there, because like you were mentioning there that you were feeding your fish, like say the cheese and stuff like that. You know, these can be byproducts of other industries there, and they're going in and they're adding value then to your fish, because I'd be sure that the nutrient value is going to be going up with these kind of feeds that are going in there. So again, you know, that's going to be offering maybe a cheaper food source there. One that, again, it removes to when aquaponics is done in a proper way. A big problem I have with fish farming is when it's done in the rivers, when it's done in the open sea, because there's problems there. I love aquaponics because it actually does fish farming in a way in which it doesn't actually devastate the local fish economy, because it's not actively in there invading their space. So that's another great thing about it. I really love that it's something I'd love to be able to be more involved with here. I wish, you know, I have a lovely polytunnel out the back garden. I've got a duck and a couple of chickens out there at the moment. So and I'm actively composting and stuff like that. But I really would love to have a nice little fish pond out there, and to be recirculating that in, and to be adding to the quality of, as I say, I have strawberries out there. I've got all sorts of herbs, and I'm going to be getting my chilies out there now very soon, actually. Yes, as I said, it's spring season now, so we're going to have chilies. I love growing chilies. I'm a spicy man. So we're going to be getting those, but I'd love to have the fish out there. But apparently, as we were talking beforehand, it seemed to be harmful practice to the fish or something like that. It was a funny one. Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. The environmental, the animal husbandry guys here, they have a problem with using aquaponics for producing fish, because it's not seen to be ethical towards the handling of the fish or something like that. Like, you know, we're going to be killing them and eating them.
they're happy to use traps and all kinds of bycatch and saltwater, but how dare you grow some aquaculture fish in a closed loop contained system with no disease, and actually sustainable using sustainable fish feed. How dare you?
Yeah, yeah. No, so I really do look forward to the day that cannabis is fully legal here, and we're no longer having to hide. And I can add a couple of cannabis plants, then a couple of more cannabis plants to my polytunnel. Because I'm not going to really lie. Like I've often lied about it in the past and kind of been like, oh yeah, my friend grows. But look, despite my activism and my public outspokenness on this issue, like I still do continue to grow cannabis, and I will continue to grow cannabis, and I won't stop. I'm going to do it in my home, and I'm going to do it in my garden, and I'm going to do it in other places as a guerrilla gardener too, and I encourage others to do it as well. Growing your own cannabis, it's a very empowering affair, and it is a gateway drug actually, but it's not a gateway drug to other drugs. It's actually a gateway drug to other vegetables and stuff like that, because once you start growing cannabis, you're going to want to start growing thyme, oregano, parsley, and every other bloody thing in between as well. So yeah, I won't lie. I will be adding some cannabis plants out there as well. I'll be using some autoflowers out into the polytunnel there very soon. Oh, you're muted there again.
Dope. Thank you so much for joining us again. You want to plug yourself one last time and tell everybody how to find you if they're catching us late?
Yeah, Martin's World. Martinsworld.ie is probably the best place to go, and up there you'll find all of the social links, and choose your poison, whichever one you prefer to go to. The only one that I don't have up there actually, I think, is TikTok actually. So if you're on TikTok, you're going to have to find me by Martin's World. I'll add TikTok to the .ie there later at some stage, and my daughter will be delighted.
There you go, and you can find links to all his socials up there at the top right of his website.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, I will be very active over the coming months, so it will be worthwhile to subscribe to the YouTube. It's probably where I'll be most active.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you so much for the wonderful episode. It's been quite the journey. We've talked about quite a slew of different topics and all kinds of interesting things. So it's been quite a great conversation, and we'll definitely have to have you back on here in a couple of months and follow up with where things are on in Ireland and what's going on with you in your world. So that definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, anytime. And again, thanks very much for affording me the opportunity to speak to your audience. I hope people enjoyed the conversation, and I hope my accent wasn't too thick.
Oh no, it's fine. We have people from all over the world on here, so they're
Excellent.
they're definitely used to it. Thank you so much. And for those of you who want to find the podcast, you can find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, all the things at Ponics or Growing with Fishes. You can find out Marty and I's online class, apmjclass.com. If you need aquaponic cannabis nutrients, you can find us at apmjnewts.com. And 1 second here, I actually found the website for the conference I was trying to mention earlier. I did want to mention them. I'm speaking there. Here it is, organiccultivators.net for the conference on that. Let me throw that up here real quick. Put on by Wendy Kornberg. Find it here. If you're in Oklahoma, it will be the end of July. And I have, sorry. There you go. You can find more information on the conference there. You got Wendy Kornberg, Chris Trump, Ben Acadia, myself, Dan Kittredge, Wendy Kornberg, Patrick King, and a whole Susan Wainwright Evans, Jana Beckerman, and a whole bunch of other wonderful people. So if you want to check that out, you can over at organiccultivators.net, as well as a bunch of other resources. Alrighty, thank you everybody for watching. You can find us at again at apmjclass.com, apmjnewts.com if you need aquaponic cannabis nutrients, or at your favorite podcast platform at Growing with Fishes or Ponics. Thanks a lot. It's been a wonderful episode with Martin's World. And again, remember, next Thursday, we will be with Tommy Chong live at 3 p.m. Pacific instead of our normal time of 7:30. So we do have to do an earlier episode. He's only available kind of during normal work hours for, he's an older gentleman, so he enjoys the
He's a
TV time.
professional.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be on with you guys next Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific.